You want to say anything or I'll say last? So may I have your attention, please?
Just like,
Good evening, everyone.
can members settle down? We're about to start.
Good evening, everyone. Can members settle down, please? We're about to start the meeting. Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Hammersmith and Fulham's budget meeting at full council. My name is Councillor Darrell Brown, Deputy Mayor of the London Borough of Hammersmith and Fulham. Unfortunately, the Mayor is unwell and cannot attend tonight. In accordance with paragraph 8.2 of the Council Procedure Rules, I'm required to ask if members agree that I take the chair for tonight's meeting. Agreed. Thank you. This is a hybrid meeting where councillors will be contributing from home as well as from here in the chamber. Members joining remotely cannot participate or vote on decision reports. By participating in tonight's meeting, you are consenting to being recorded. To ensure the meeting runs smoothly, if the whip has not provided me with your name and you wish to speak, please raise your hand and wait until I call you. If you wish to raise a point under standing orders, please raise your hand and I will invite you to speak at a suitable point. When called to speak, please state the standing order you wish to use. Please wait patiently and do not interrupt the person speaking. If you wish to raise a point of order or personal explanation, you may interrupt the councillor speaking. However, please ensure your points are factual, brief, and to the point. For the councillors joining on Zoom, please keep your microphone muted unless you are speaking. The leader and the leader of the opposition have unlimited time to speak during the budget debate. I will ask other members to keep their speeches to 5 minutes. A timer will be in operation. Please remember that when the traffic light is on amber, you have 1 minute left to speak. When it turns red, please stop your speech. I would also like to remind members that it's customary for members to stand when speaking, if you're able to, so you can clearly seen and heard. If you're watching at home and would like to follow along with the agenda, there is a link in the description on YouTube. Fire alarm instructions. If the fire alarm sounds, please leave the meeting in an orderly fashion by the nearest exit, which is in the lift, lobby, and down the stairs. Don't leave the lifts, don't use the lifts, I should say, and don't stay behind to collect personal belongings. Officers will direct you to the assembly point in Shortlands Road, and if you can't use the stairs, officers will escort you to a refuge area. The meeting will be taken as adjourned until it can safely resume business. Item 1, apologies for absence.
Thank you, Mayor. Apologies for absence have been received from Councillors Apthorpe and Afzal Khan. Councillor Morton sends apologies for lateness. Councillors Patel, Quigley, Rosenberg and Rowbottom are joining remotely.
Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Ali Khan is also sent her apologies.
Yes.
Sorry, I missed.
Thank you. Item 2, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Thank you. Item 3, minutes. Is it the wish of the council that I sign the minutes of the council meeting held on 18th of January 2023? Thank you. Mayor's announcements. Bush Theatre, Theatre of the Year Award and 50th anniversary. The Bush Theatre was named Theatre of the Year at the recent Stage Awards 2023 held at Theatre Royal Drury Lane, London. The Stage Awards are the highest profile awards celebrating excellence in British theatre across the whole of the UK. The theatre pipped other shortlisted venues to the gong, including theatres in London, Liverpool, Leicester and Bolton. This year is the 50th anniversary of the Bush Theatre's opening and has been described as a year of celebration, and winning the award is the icing on the cake. As the council, we are proud to support our local cultural industry and congratulate the staff for achieving their prestigious award. Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Tomorrow marks the one-year anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. As a council, we support the people of Ukraine and remember those who have died, been injured and displaced by this brutal war. I invite the leader, Councillor Stephen Cowan, to say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Tonight marks the eve of the one-year anniversary of Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine. Over the last year, we've seen the bravery of the Ukrainian people and welcomed Ukrainian refugees to safety in Hammersmith and Fulham. We've heard of the horrors of the war crimes committed by Putin's thugs, but the lessons of this history are clear. It is always the first step, not the last, when an autocracy invades a democracy. An important lesson in history is that dictators may win in the short term, but in the end, it is democracies that triumph. We see that today, as we did shortly after the invasion in Russia. So tonight, the Ukrainian flag stands in this chamber, as it will remain in this chamber until victory is Ukraine's. And all of us reaffirm our vow to stand in solidarity and do with everything for people fighting for freedom in Ukraine. And we send our support to those opposing Putin in Russia, and indeed to the brave people of Belarus, who also have a wicked dictatorship to cope with. Thank you.
Thank you. I invite the leader of the opposition, Councillor Victoria Brocklebank Fowler, to say a few words.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I agree with everything that Councillor Cowan has just said. Our profound respects to President Zelensky and the Ukrainian people. It is very sad to remember that it was a year ago tomorrow that war was declared by Russia. The Ukrainian people have shown great bravery, and I would congratulate and thank them for that. I'd also like to wholeheartedly thank the many residents of Hammersmith and Fulham who have so generously opened their homes to the elderly, women and child refugees from Ukraine. Our thoughts and prayers are with the Ukrainian people, those who have lost loved ones and those who have been injured. I have no doubt, though, that Ukraine will emerge victorious.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak on this item? In which case, I would like us all to observe a minute's silence in their memory. Thank you. Please be seated. Now, item 5, public questions.
Madam Mayor,
I beg your pardon? Yes.
under Standing Order 15E12, I am proposing the suspension of Standing Order 12A many residents have made trouble to not only submit their question, but turn up here tonight. This is one of the shorter council meetings of the year, and in light of the administration's pledge to do things with citizens as opposed to against them, I think it's only fair, right and proper that we allow them to have their questions put to the full council. Thank you.
Thank you. Movement to vote.
Thank you.
Councillor Owen.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I think we've had this mentioned at every council meeting recently. We have not yet even started public questions and they're asking for an extension. I think we should go for the 20 minutes. And what I would say is there has been ample opportunity under this administration to discuss many issues. I counted today, we've had 19 resident-led commissions under this administration. We have a lot of public discussion and public opportunities at our packs. And I do seem to remember, I've wanted to say this on a couple of occasions when Councillor Carmel has raised this. I seem to remember at one council meeting a long time ago when we were in opposition, the then cabinet member for adult social care spent the whole of question time on one answer, simply to avoid all of the other questions that members of the public then really wanted to make. So I do want to put that on record at this point, and let's see how we go with the 20 minutes that we've got. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. And as I'm chairing the meeting, I agree. So we'll stick to the 20 minutes. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank all the residents who took the time to submit questions to tonight's meeting. Public questions is limited to 20 minutes. And if a question does not receive a reply in the meeting, a written response will be sent and published in the minutes. All of the questions called will have an opportunity, or questionnaires called will have an opportunity to ask a brief follow-up question. So you'll ask the question and a follow-up. Okay, so question 1, I invite Andrew Pendleton to ask a question to Councillor Sharon Holder, Cabinet Member of Public Realm. Please, can you read your question? Thank you.
Thank you, and Chair, if I may, I live in Fulham Reach, but my son goes to the Hurlingham Academy, and where I'm also a parent governor at the school. So it seems to me that in the last couple of weeks, the clean air neighbourhood in the area has been extremely successful. It's visibly reduced traffic on the road. It made a visible difference, safer and cleaner for children. So I'm so
sorry, is that your question?
My question is 2 parts.
Right.
When will this approach be rolled out as you promised to the rest of the borough? And because local traffic is also a problem, and the clean air neighbourhoods approach only deals with traffic that comes from outside the borough, when will you take measures to curb local traffic as well, so that our children can breathe as much clean air as possible?
Thank you. I invite the Cabinet Member to provide a response, please.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Andrew, for your comments welcoming the Clean Air Neighbourhoods programme. We will explore all possible steps to ensure that all residents benefit from the Clean Air Neighbourhood programme. Measures under consideration, as I'm sure you're aware, include the introduction of bus priority lanes, widening footpaths, cycling infrastructure, trees and greening, and integrating sustainable drainage and flood mitigation. Clean Air Neighbourhoods will therefore be supported with comprehensive public realm and greening initiatives to repurpose road space and make more provision for cycling and walking. Further community-based events will also be introduced, such as play streets and street theatre, to enable a thriving cafe-style culture and encourage more sustainable living. We will continue to introduce further projects on our main roads across the borough with the purpose of prioritising walking and cycling.
Do you have a follow-up question?
If I may.
Thank you, certainly.
Yes. So this week marked the 10th anniversary of the death of Ella Kissy-Deborah, who is the first child to die with air pollution as a cause of death on their death certificate. It's a very sad anniversary and something that all of us need to think about in relation to the toxicity of the air in London. particularly around schools. So I wanted to also ask Councillor Holden, and thank you for your answer to my first question. When will the council deliver on its pledge to bring in school streets?
Andrew, thank you. I'm sure that Ella, Kissy Deborah's family would welcome you mentioning them today on the 10th anniversary. Can I just make it clear in answer to your previous point, which was when we will roll things out? There is a programme and we plan to roll things out consistently throughout the council in collaboration with our residents when they want us to do so. More importantly, is our objective. Sorry, your second part, that last question was?
When you'll deliver on the pledge of school streets?
In the context of school streets, I think we do not see, sorry, I keep saying I, and I mustn't, there's no I in we. We do not see school streets as being any different to what we're doing in terms of the clean air programme. So therefore, in any neighbourhood where there is a school, we will be consulting them vigorously, and we will be talking to schools and have plans to talk to schools about what we can do to reduce air quality, or not, well, the bad air quality in any area with them on a one-to-one basis. And we've already started that programme in terms of gathering data around air quality monitoring for schools already. Thank you.
Thank you. Now to question 2. The questionnaire won't be able to attend, so I'll move to the next question. Question 3. I invite Claire Gordon to ask a question to Councillor Sharon Holder, I beg your pardon, Cabinet Member of Public Realm. Please, can you read your question? Thank you.
Yes, hello, good evening, everyone. I live in the south of the borough, just on a road off Wandsworth Bridge Road, which is part of the new cleaner air neighbourhood and right by the bridge. And although I must say that it's a fantastic, all the cars that are and the traffic that are not on either side of the road now, that's benefited and that's better. And I personally find that Ringo's easy to use and I can get people through and deliveries come to me and I can get Ubers, so that's all fine. But the Wandsworth Bridge Road is still totally and utterly chocker. And at standstills throughout the day, and the pollution is dreadful. And that obviously we don't want pollution anywhere and it spreads. So it was just, when will sort of that be addressed and how will it be addressed? And what are the plans for the Wandsworth Bridge Road going forward? Thank you.
Thank you. I invite the Cabinet Member to provide a response.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Clean air neighbourhoods will be supported with comprehensive public realm and greening initiatives, as I've said before, to repurpose road space and make more provision for cycling and walking. Further community-based events will also be introduced, as I've said, around play streets and street theatre to enable a thriving cafe-style culture to develop and encourage more sustainable living. We will continue to introduce further projects on our main roads across the borough with the purpose of prioritising walking and cycling. This is in answer to the question that was put in writing. Okay.
Thank you. Do you have a follow-up question?
Hello, yes, thank you very much for the answers. Again, is there any time frame to this? To when these things will start being put in place, or like an order of how things will start? So is the stuff that you've got for this year or next year, or how will that happen? Thank you.
Well, again, as I've said previously, what I don't want to do and cannot do is to give you any definitive answer about when things will start and when things will finish, because it will depend on our residents. We do and have done up to now we've had preliminary discussions with residents in different parts of the borough. And yes, we do have a outline timetable, but at the moment, that is all it is. It's quite high level. We are not as yet in a position to confirm when things will start until we've had our discussions with those residents in those particular neighbourhoods.
Thank you. Now to question 4. I invite Natalie Lindsay to ask a question to Councillor Sharon Holder, Cabinet Member of Public Realm. Please, can you read your question?
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you very much. I'm going to be staying on the theme of air pollution, but moving to a slightly different angle of air pollution, which is the air pollution caused by wood burners. I'm hoping that everybody has seen the coverage of this in the press. 2 weeks ago, when we had a period of high pressure and very cold weather, it was calculated that over 70% of the air pollution in the air that we were breathing in this borough was being caused specifically by people burning wood in their wood burners. This is such an easy win. There is such an easy way of getting rid of this pollution. There is no sense in 2023 to be allowing for wood burners. We got rid of coal burners after the Great Smog in 1952.
I'm sorry, Ms. Lindsay.
So my question
Yeah.
is, very simply, what measures can the council take to educate the residents who have wood burners not to use them? And can the council do anything to compel them not to use them, particularly in periods of high pressure?
Thank you. I invite the Cabinet Member to provide a response.
Again, Deputy Mayor, thank you so much to both to Natalie and people who support this issue for your timely question and the great work I know you are doing in your community. Tackling the acute dangers of wood burning is a key element of developing clean air neighbourhoods, and reducing air pollution, informing and educating residents on the dangers are therefore a priority for this administration. The council are currently reviewing their procedures on enforcing the council's current smoke control orders that cover a majority of the borough in accordance with recently published new guidance from central government for enforcement of smoke controlled areas in goal 2 of their environmental improvement plan, which will be included in our response and set out in our response. The council will also, in 2023 be applying to the Secretary of State for the approval of a borough-wide consolidated smoke control order to comply with new provisions for smoke control areas enacted under the Environment Act 2021. The council provides information regarding the impact of solid fuel burning on local air quality on the council's website, which can be found if people wish to look. The council, under current legislation, cannot prohibit residents or businesses in the borough burning solid fuels in either open fire or wood burners. The council is proposing to undertake, however, a borough-wide consultation survey in 2023 to ascertain support within Hammersmith and Fulham for a borough-wide prohibition of the burning of solid fuels. And I hope that all of you will partake in that consultation.
Thank you. Do you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, thank you very much. That's incredibly encouraging to hear that the council is being so proactive on that front. And it means I can skip my other bit of a dig about the burners and actually then move on to actually our gas boilers. So a third of the emissions in LBHF are actually come from our gas boilers. And by the council's own reckoning, 80% of our housing stock is not going to be renewed in the next foreseeable future, which means that the refurbishment of our homes and the decarbonisation of our homes has to happen by taking our gas boilers out of our homes in order to be able to reduce our emissions. Can the council give us some information as to how they're going to go about encouraging and helping households to take their gas boilers out of their homes and replace them with heat pumps, please?
Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
invite the Cabinet Member to provide a response.
Thank you, Natalie. I have to be honest with you that that question is slightly more complicated because of the impact and implications it has for different parts of the council. And for that reason alone, I would appreciate if we put this in writing to you, and which we will keep, we will hold on record for the next meeting, but we'll communicate with you between now and then, if that's okay. Okay.
Thank you very much. For question 5, the questionnaire is not able to attend. We will move to the next question, which is question 6. I invite Gary Fannin to ask a question to Councillor Ben Coleman, Deputy Leader. Please, can you read your question?
Thank you. With the introduction of the clean air neighborhoods in South Fulham, there's now cameras on the east and west of Wandsworth Bridge Road, which are monitoring to prevent traffic cutting through, commuting traffic cutting through the areas. I also understand that there's additional cameras which aren't actually issuing fines, but simply there to monitor in case they need to be switched on as well. Can the council confirm if there's any similar cameras on the Wandsworth Bridge Road itself to monitor what's actually happening on the Wandsworth Bridge Road in terms of numbers of vehicles, but also the types of vehicles using the ANPR technology? If you can confirm if there are cameras, and if not, could there be some? Thank you.
Thank you. I invite the Cabinet Member to provide a response.
Sorry, Gary, you've got me again. Anyhow, with the introduction of the clean air neighbourhood, there are now cameras to the east and west of Wandsworth Bridge Road to prevent commuters cutting through these streets. I understand there are also. Oh, sorry, I apologise. I'm reading your question instead of my answer. It does help. There you go. That just shows you how organised we really are. Yes, there are cameras on Wandsworth Bridge Road that monitor traffic numbers and types. Hammersmith and Fulham engineers use data from traffic counters and the sensors to highlight trouble spots and benchmark the success of the clean air neighbourhood projects, including the key aim of reducing air pollution. The data shows the project has contributed to the removal of at least 1 tonne of CO2 per day from the area. The air quality has improved significantly since the introduction of the East project and has contributed to NOx pollution falling by 60%. ANPR cameras for monitoring traffic is used in order to track origin and destination, and these have not necessarily been placed on Wandsworth Bridge Road itself. The traffic profile for the whole area is deciphered from a combination of automatic traffic counters, traffic sensors, and ANPR traffic monitors. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have a follow-up question?
Sorry, just a clarification. So there are not ANPR cameras on the Wandsworth Bridge Road currently? Is that what I understood?
No, I think there are ANPR traffic monitors on Wandsworth Bridge Road, I'm sure, in the area, but it's about the whole area as opposed to it being specifically about Wandsworth Bridge Road.
Okay, fine. So then my follow-up question is, using that technology, is there more that can be done to discourage the Wandsworth Bridge Road being used as a strategic road network and people coming from outside the say the M25? So squeezing that traffic even further, those commuting traffic. Thank you.
Thank you. I invite the Cabinet Member to provide a response.
Right, again, in answer to that question, I mean, I think what I would like to point out is that Wandsworth Bridge Road, like main arterial roads, they don't belong to us. Or whilst we do things and we seek permission to do things from TfL, in the main, they belong to TfL. So we do have permission to do certain things, but it has to be in the context of what we're doing with clean. And at this moment in time, yeah, okay.
Sorry, could we?
Yeah, at this moment in time, if we want to do anything else, we would have to look at that in more detail. And so I'll ask our officers to have a look at that and to come back to you in writing about what we can and what we can't do. Okay?
Thank you very much. This is the end of question time. Oh, sorry, beg your pardon. There is a question. Question 8, beg your pardon. So I invite Vivian Goldstein to ask a question to Councillor Sharon Holder. Cabinet Member for Public Realm, please can you ask your question? Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Vivian Goldstein. Due to the South Fulham camera scheme, I am seeing great displacement of traffic all around the Fulham area, which is causing just as much congestion and pollution, if not more, than previously. I'm sure that if Hammersmith Bridge were open, things would be much easier. Is it possible to open Imperial Road to ease traffic flow, please?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I invite the Cabinet Member to provide a response.
I'm so eager, I can't get in there quick enough. Can I just say, a key component of the South Fulham clean air neighbourhood is tackling toxic air pollution by reducing out of borough traffic on Imperial Road and the residential roads to the east. Our engineers have previously made it clear that opening Imperial Road would simply draw more cars into the area and increase traffic congestion and pollution across Fulham. Okay, we can constantly monitor traffic data and behaviours across Fulham, and there is no evidence of any significant displacement of traffic. During the trial to the east of Wandsworth Bridge Road, traffic fell by 12% on the road from launch of the trial in July 2020 to it being made permanent in December 2021. This is because sat-navs started routing drivers other ways, which are around the M25 for longer trips over Vauxhall Bridge for central London. We anticipate similar results for the current trials to the west will occur.
Sorry, thank you. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time. The 20 minutes is up, but we, if you didn't have time for your question, you will receive a written response. But thank you very much. Thank you everyone for coming. I'm so sorry, we don't, once we have the 20 minutes up, we have to, yeah, I'm so sorry. Item 6, committee reports. 6.1, revenue budget and council tax levels 2023 to 2024. I call upon the leader to move the report and recommendations.
Formally moved.
The agreed convention is that the leader of the council and the leader of the opposition have unlimited time to speak on this report, and up to 3 other speakers from each side can speak for 5 minutes each. Councillor Cowan will sum it up. I call on the leader of the council, Councillor Stephen Cowan, to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I know I speak, I think, for everyone in the chamber in wishing the Mayor a speedy recovery from her illness. And I hope she hears that. Okay, tonight we will agree the annual budget for the London Borough of Hammersmith and Fulham. We will agree this budget, as we've agreed every budget, guided by our values of ruthless financial efficiency, being a compassionate council, and putting the needs of all our residents and all our businesses first. So tonight, I set out our programme and confirm the council's total net expenditure budget for the municipal and financial year 2023-2024 will be £132 million, 627,000. We confirm that we have accepted the government's instructions and their modelling, which adds 2.99% to Hammersmith and Fulham's proportion of council tax. That means Band D council tax will be set at £871.86. We agree to apply the government's adult social care precept of 2%. We will freeze charges for vital services, and we approve the extraordinary £10,651,000 of new extra investment on vital frontline services that will support all the residents and businesses of our beloved borough. This budget has been put together with care and skill in what are some of the most difficult financial circumstances our country has faced in the post-war period. It is also the most challenging economic environment our borough has ever had to work in since it was formed in 1965, some 58 years ago. All of us in this chamber, therefore, owe a huge debt of gratitude to the team that has done this fine work for the people of our borough. So can I ask you to join me and thank Savinda Kelsey, the Director of Finance, Graham Kenneth, the Strategic Director of the Environment, Jonathan Pitstone, the Strategic Director of the Economy, David Tatlow, the Director of Resources, Jackie McShannon, the Strategic Director of Children's Services, Lisa Redfern, Strategic Director of Social Care, and Sharon Lee, our Chief Executive, and the formidable Cabinet Member for Finance and Reform, Councillor Rowan Reid. Our team, this team, has worked hard and given us a budget that delivers significantly more for significantly less. To put their impressive work into context, it's important to understand that this year's total net expenditure budget is 56% lower than the total net expenditure budget of 2010. It's lower because austerity, an economic programme that still dictates government thinking and still today is as cruel as it is economically illiterate. Despite that, this Labour administration has found a way of investing additional funds into the statutory and non-statutory services relied upon by people across our borough. That means this year, we will add an extra £1 million for more cost of living support on top of what we've already done, an extra £1 million for those facing the greatest of hardships. We will add an extra 1.7 million for the environment. We will add extra 1.7 million for children. And we will add an extra 4.1 million for adult social care. Madam Deputy Mayor, Hammersmith and Fulham is a beautiful place. Its bustling high streets, offices, leafy residential roads and estates are homes to thousands of businesses, world-class academic institutions, Charing Cross and Hammersmith hospitals, and 185,000 residents. On any stroll along our beautiful riverfront or through our parks and streets, you will hear residents speaking French, Hausa, Korean, Spanish, Tagalog, Polish, Somali, Farsi, German, Arabic, Pashto, Italian, Yoruba, Ukrainian, and more. And you'll hear English accents originating from Fulham to Grenada, Ireland to India, Birmingham to Barbados, and more. We are in one of the most diverse places to live on earth. Whether you're born and bred in Hammersmith and Fulham, or whether you originate elsewhere, all of us should be proud of our rich diversity and proud to live in such a wonderful, welcoming place. This Labour administration is extremely serious about its responsibility to undertake and fund policies that work for everyone, not just a few. That's why in this budget, we crack down on crime with extra funding for 72 law enforcement officers, our groundbreaking gangs unit, the most sophisticated and extensive CCTV network in Britain, and new measures to protect women and girls. It's why in this budget, we help people needing care and support during the most challenging times in their lives. With extra funding for free home care, the only council in England still to do that, and freezing charges for essential services like Meals and Wheels. It's why in this budget, we go further to support people through the cost of living crisis with extra funding for free breakfast for all primary school children, meal vouchers for children outside school term times, help with energy and other household bills, help for people needing food banks, and help for people struggling to buy clothes and essential health products. It's why in this year's budget, council tax is, in real terms, 15% lower than it was in 2014-15 when we arrived in office. Now, it's easy to just talk numbers in an annual budget meeting, but there are very real human stories behind every set of financial figures in the documents that lie before us tonight. So when each of us looks at the figures on council tax and sees that Hammersmith and Fulham is just one of a handful of administrations who have structured their council tax so only 53% of residents pay the full amount, and our poorest residents do not have to pay anything at all, think of the 86,950 people whom that helps. Think of the mums, dads and guardians worried about paying the bills. Think of the pensioner anxious about how they'll cope. Think of all of them, because our message to them tonight is help is on the way. Same with our investment in crime fighting. An elderly lady recently took me aside to privately share how our new law enforcement team had stopped her being a victim of crime, and how they'd even checked up on her afterwards. She said not only did the law enforcement officers tackle her problem, but they also gave her a confidence that people were out there looking out for her, acting to keep her safe. These are the things we vote for tonight. A stronger, safer, kinder borough for everyone. This increased spending in this budget is only possible because we are changing the culture of Hammersmith and Fulham and have made ruthless financial efficiency the bedrock of our programme. Since residents hired us to lead this borough, our Labour team has slashed a record £165 million in wasteful council spending, a record. When we entered office, we were surprised to find an old-fashioned, indifferent bureaucracy. I had been the borough's leader of the opposition. I sat in meetings, not dissimilar to this one, and heard Conservative administration councillors explain why they had to cut services, increase charges, or sell off council homes. Some of those councillors are still here, sitting over there. All of us who were there back then remember how, at the beginning of their Conservative administration in 2007 and 2008, Conservative councillors voted to introduce 578 stealth taxes. They cut 2.8 million from the adult social care budget. They cut 3.3 million in the first 2 years from the children's services budget. By 2008, Hammersmith and Fulham's Conservative councillors had closed the Castle Club and went on to sell the building at a knockdown price, a youth club. They cut funding and tried to close down the Hammersmith and Fulham Law Centre, denying some of the most desperate people in our community the chance of essential free legal representation. They cut home care services for 550 elderly and disabled residents, then reneged on their manifesto promise and introduced home care charges. They cut police numbers in Hammersmith. And they shut down and sold off 12 homeless hostels, all at knockdown prices. And these are just some of the cuts Conservative councillors voted through in their first couple of years. Why, you might ask? Well, at the time, they said it was necessary. They said they had no choice. But by the standards of today, this council was rolling in money back then. They had over a third more than we've got now. We can best understand the reasons why the Conservatives took those actions by some of their own words. For example, when asked in December 2007 why the Conservative administration had blocked the charity Crisis, the homeless charity, from taking the BBC's offer to use vacant premises for a Christmas shelter to give homeless people hot food and a warm bed, possibly the other way around, throughout the seasonal period. Their explanation was the homeless are a law and order issue. When asked in June 2008 why Conservative councillors had gone to MIPIM, the Property Developers Jamboree in Cannes and the French Riviera, their explanation was it enables attendees to have the conversations necessary with central government, organisations and officers that will unlock contentious development sites. We later learned that all, yes, all, of Hammersmith and Fulham's council estates were being offered for sale and demolition by the Conservative administration.
Thanks.
Sally Taylor remembers what that was like. It was wicked of them to do that, but it was grossly incompetent too. Consider this. The deal they did to sell off the West Kensington and Gibbs Green estates was just over 100 million quid as part of Capco's £12.05 billion House of Cards Earls Court scheme. But they took on the legal responsibility to buy out all the leasehold and freehold homes over the course of that 25-year scheme. But the 100 million they were given wasn't index linked. There's one person over there will get that. It would have bankrupted the housing revenue account, and eventually it would have bankrupted the council. In fact, none of the harsh measures taken by Hammersmith and Fulham Conservatives were ever necessary. These measures were done by the Conservatives because of their conservative values. Conservative values that care about a few, but hold the many in contempt. From 2010 onwards, the Conservative government paid councils millions of pounds via the council tax freeze grant to freeze or cut council tax. That was how Hammersmith and Fulham Conservatives cut council tax. That's something we supported. But the contrast with the environment, the political and economic environment we operate now, it's stark. Since shortly after we arrived in office, the Conservative government based their funding to local government on the assumption that all councils will follow their instructions to do two things: put council tax up by the maximum, always pass on the full adult social care precept. Now, we haven't done that. Our Labour administration has cut or frozen council tax for 5 out of the last 8 years. But that is not the worst of having to deal with successive Conservative governments. A few weeks ago in this chamber, one of the new Conservative councillors complained that the debate about Liz Truss and the National Conservative government wasn't really anything to do with what happens here in Hammersmith and Fulham. Now, I appreciate people say, or might say, naive things. So consider this. The resulting inflation and interest rates caused by Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng's short but reckless time as custodians of our national finances cost this council £15 million. 15 million. Now, I've asked people to guess how much they think it cost. They always say a few hundred thousand, maybe $1 million. You watch their mouths drop when you point out it is £15 million that reckless Conservative government cost for people of this borough. But even that is not the worst of having to deal with successive Conservative governments. What they do to our country actually affects everything that happens to our borough. The most basic economic point is a simple one. Our country needs to generate wealth so we can pay our bills. We're a trading nation. But on the 30th of June last year, the Financial Times reported that the UK's trade performance fell to its lowest level since records began. The records began in the 1840s. Now, they weren't keeping records, really, in Elizabethan times, but we were a trading nation then as well. On the 4th of August, the Bank of England projected the UK's longest recession since the global financial crisis. On the 9th of August, CNBC, an American financial news channel, not part, I think, of the liberal economic consensus, it ran the headline, "Political instability, trade disruptions, an energy crisis, and skyrocketing inflation are rendering the UK an emerging market country. Now, just so everyone's clear, that's not a compliment. It's a downgrade from a developed economy. On the 27th of January, a report detailed how the UK economy was 60 billion smaller compared to the average of G7 nations. And on the 13th of February, Professor Jonathan Haskell, the chair of economics at Imperial College London, said Brexit, we all know what we think of Brexit on this side of the chamber, caused a wave of investment to be stopped in its tracks, which has dealt the UK economy a productivity penalty of 29 billion, or, so that people can understand it, £1,000 per household. So when we look at everything going wrong in our country, the Bill Clinton campaign insight was correct. It's the economy, stupid. When the economy fails, everything begins to fail. So when you flick through the pages of our borough's budget, consider the measures we're taking to counter the callous, incompetent, conservative failures of the last 13 years. Child poverty up, homelessness up, use of food banks up, national taxes up, violent crime against women up, cost of living up, up, and up. Britain's national reputation down, wages down, life expectancy for the poorest women in Britain, in Great Britain, down, and our NHS on its knees. In Hammersmith and Fulham, there are people tonight deciding whether to clothe their children or pay energy bills, pay debts or go hungry, buy food or pay to heat their homes. Nurses and doctors in our borough are unable to afford to live on Jeremy Hunt and Rishi Sunak's real terms pay cuts. Picture those people. Think about the challenges they face. Helping them is what this budget has written in it throughout. David Cameron, Theresa May, Boris Johnson, Liz Truss, and Rishi Sunak's 13 years of conservative vandalism have broken Britain and damaged people's life chances in our borough. And the lessons were there before Cameron ever got into office. If they were there, because that's what exactly Cameron's favourite council did to Hammersmith and Fulham. And we're doing our best to hold it together. Our borough faces very real challenges. Our council housing simply isn't good enough. During the Conservative years, planned maintenance schemes were cut as estates were offered for sale and demolition. In 2013, Conservative councils signed up to a 10-year repairs contract, but failed to provide sufficient funds to carry out repairs. Deliberately so, one officer later advised me. When we got out of that contract just 2 years ago, there were huge backlogs, and they were confronted by the pandemic, a Brexit depleted workforce, huge increases in costs because of a rampant inflation afflicting our country, and other challenges unique to the housing service. We will fix the council housing service. We care about council housing service. We care about council housing residents, and this is a priority. And I thank Frances Ume for what she's doing to go through this and get it sorted. Thank you, Frances. Our air is filthy, as we heard tonight. It's filthy and poisonous, causing illnesses from Alzheimer's to lung cancer, heart disease to damage to child brain development. It afflicts young children with stunted lungs. Last year in London, 3,645 children and young people were admitted to hospital with chronic asthma. Last year, the number of London children being admitted to hospital with asthma rose 64%. Hammersmith and Fulham, and it has in Hammersmith Broadway and the A40, the 5th and 7th most polluted sites in Britain. We have a duty to safeguard everyone, particularly children. We will act to clean our noxious air. Our NHS is in the worst state it's been in living memory. Local health officials, which Ben and I deal with regularly, are in open despair. It was vital if we're to look back before we look forward. But Labour won the election in 2014, hired Michael Mansfield KC and saved Charing Cross Hospital. And let's not forget that Greg Hands MP and local Conservative councillors fought to close Charing Cross Hospital. They spent years deliberately trying to mislead local people by falsely claiming it was a lie for campaigners to tell people Charing Cross would be demolished, and falsely claiming it was a lie to say Charing Cross was even under threat. What a disgrace. We must never, ever let the Conservatives forget what they did with Charing Cross Hospital. No. But now we need to look to the horizon and rise to new challenges. 3 adult social care should be a right in a civilized society. Yeah. But as well as being compassionate, it is also a deeply practical way of helping our local hospitals look after patients in hospital and outside hospital without the trauma of paperwork or having to pay or being chased for debts. Meanwhile, our industrial strategy has transformed White City into a global centre for excellence in life sciences. We've attracted major life science anchor institutions and provided the space and support which has encouraged over 60 life science startups. The White City Innovation District clarion call that tomorrow is made here is a thing of note when it comes to healthcare. Think about what's happening there. We have, for example, a small company who, just one of many life science companies, who are adapting the genome of fruit flies to change the cell structures of cancer to help cancer patients live significantly longer in White City. There are other firms using AI to carry out quicker, more accurate analysis of people's illnesses and make sure they get treated and get better, quicker, and more safely than ever before. There's much going on there. With Imperial College Healthcare NHS Trust, Imperial College London, and our own Director of Public Health, and the amazing Nicola Lang, Hammersmith Fulham has an opportunity and is set to completely transform healthcare and the National Health Service. We get to set the mark and light the path for others to follow by redefining and improving and investing in the latest health services. And that's what we will do, and that's what we are focused on. Our residents face a broken Britain, of worsening crime, the biggest cost of living crisis in modern history. One local mum told me she had considered her family comfortable before this cost of living crisis disavowed her of that belief. She said that when Hammersmith and Fulham started feeding her 3 children with free breakfast, it made a critical difference. Another local parent told me that she is consumed with worry every time her son came home late because of the nature of violent crime committed against young people. How did we become a country where hardworking people need help to provide food for their families? Or where homeless and child poverty rates soar? Or where county lines gangs terrorize communities? Protecting people, preventing crime, punishing the causes of poverty and ending it, that's something that goes to the heart of our Labour administration's programme. It's why for the last 2 years, we've found an extra £10 million to help people cope with the cost of living crisis. And you heard that we're investing even more tonight. It's why we found the capital and revenue investments to crack down on crime and its causes from every aspect of our crime fighting operation to the £118 million state-of-the-art youth facilities linked to our industrial strategy. We act in this Labour administration as a bulwark against the chaos of this Conservative government's failures. Yeah. We will always be a council that has the agility to respond and respond quickly, to make a difference to the people of Hammersmith and Fulham. Now, in their book, No Ordinary Disruption, the 4 global forces breaking all the trends, Richard Dobbs, James Manica, and Jonathan Wurtzel explain how, compared with the Industrial Revolution, This change is happening 10 times faster at 3,000 times the scale or 3 million times the impact. What they're talking about is a new industrial revolution. They're talking about how we live, how we work, how we will earn a living, and they're warning that it's going to change faster than ever before at a pace many of us will struggle to cope with. There are a few hotspots around the world where the economic ecosystems are leading that change. Kendall Square in Massachusetts, the Bay Area in California, Barcelona in Spain, a handful more, and now White City here in Hammersmith and Fulham. Since 2017, when we launched our industrial strategy, there have been 6,500 new jobs created in biotech, medtech, clean tech, engineering, AI, quantum computing, defense innovation, and food tech. We've attracted global anchor organizations like Novartis, Airbus, IT, Synthos, Autolus, the Royal College of Art, and NATO. White City companies have raised 1.2 billion investment in the last 6 years alone. The UK Competitive Index now predicts Hammersmith and Fulham will see one of the highest ongoing rates of productivity per worker and the highest growth business investment in our borough, which outstrips the rest of West London combined. But we know that we have to grow wealth. We know we want to grow a strong, robust economy. But we in the Labour Party want something more than that. We want inclusive growth. That's why we have charged Jackie McShannon and Jonathan Pickstone with making sure our nurseries, our schools, our apprenticeship programs, our affordable childcare, our lifelong learning schemes all work so that our residents can seize the vast opportunities on their doorstep, which we're bringing there through Andrew Jones's very clever industrial strategy. Thank you, Andrew Jones. These are just some of the challenges we face, but it is for us as the optimists, the people that care about all the people, not just a few, to begin to reshape the future in a way that all of us can be proud of. This Labour administration will always strive to be worthy of the trust our residents have put in us. We have always delivered on the promises we make at each election, and that's what we will do following the last. So with this budget, we will have increased spending on children's services by 18 million since 2014. We will have increased our investment in adult social care and public health by 22 million since 2014. And we will have increased over 65 million in new frontline services since 2014. The message to local people tonight, with this budget and with every budget, is we are firmly on your side. There is much to be done, and there's so much more to be done still. We will make our borough a stronger, safer, kinder place for everyone. That's what this budget does. It has Labour written throughout. I commend this budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I now call on the Leader of the Opposition, Councillor Victoria Brocklebank-Fowler, to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Well, none of what we've just heard will have come as a surprise to this chamber. Blaming the government, self-congratulations and outrageous and arguable spin from yourselves to our residents. Playing politics is not what this borough wants. A year ago tomorrow, as we mentioned earlier, Russia started the current war against Ukraine. This has led to inflation in energy prices and a rise in the cost of living. This and other external factors, such as COVID and the Brexit adjustments, have challenged the government's sound fiscal policies. The government has spent substantial sums to support people during these extraordinary circumstances, which is why we had quicker vaccines and a more generous furlough scheme than the EU. Interest rates, which had been at an historic record low for over 10 years, have now risen. Inflation, however, is now expected to fall by 50% by the end of the year. On the downside, strikes in the public sector have cost the country over £2 billion. This doesn't help the economy. Despite this, growth is expected in 2024, according to the IMF. This is the IMF, who are renowned for not liking any fiscal policies, as illustrated over the years by its many contradictory statements. We have avoided a long and deep recession due to government strategies. The Chancellor said that although there are risks, and I quote, "The economy is more resilient than many feared, and compared to the G7, ours is the fastest growing economy." Against this background of dramatic world economic change, this council has responded in a very typical manner. There are those who may call your publicity of your spending strategies economical with the truth. Why spend your speech talking about what you think we did, which we didn't, 17 years ago? I will show you how bad the situation is now. The first claim in your 2022 manifesto is to confront the cost of living rises. We will run through various examples so we can see that you do not do as you say. But firstly, I'd like to concentrate on how the government has supported this and other councils. Initially, I'd like to emphasise that constantly complaining about government reductions in funding shows a lack of realism as to the recent economic situation. You are in administration and you have to work within your means to produce a balanced budget. So blaming the government just doesn't cut it with our residents. This year, you have received a whopping extra £7.9 million in grant funding from the government. Whining about the reductions which started in 2010, well before you unfortunately came to administration in 2014, strikes residents as incompetent management. And, quelle surprise, you have managed to produce a balanced budget each year despite having to cut out the dead wood. On your figures, this amounts to not spending 56% or £48 million of that original budget. Managing the council is what you are elected to do, and carping on about how difficult it is really not very professional. If you don't want the job, we do. I think this chamber needs to know that this settlement is the equivalent of plus 9.5% in cash terms of national core spending power. This is a very agreeable increase and a higher than expected settlement. Nationally, this is 5.1 billion in additional resources to help local authorities support residents through challenging times. Part of this is a new one-off funding guarantee that ensures all local authorities sees a minimum 3% increase in their core spending power before, and I emphasise the before, taking any local decisions on raising council tax. Ring-fence grants are also increasing by 3.245 million, which I have no doubt you will spend. During the COVID years, the grants which you received covered the increased costs to such an extent that you still have a surplus of £2.3 million in the reserves and general balances. So you are putting up council tax by the maximum of 2.99%. I bet you wish you could go higher, but sensibly the government has capped the percentage increase to contain profligate Labour councils before making them have a referendum. How on earth does hiking the council tax by 2.99% help residents with the cost of living as you've promised in your manifesto? This means an extra £78 for a Band D property, including the mayoral precept. Obviously, residents are not surprised by your audacity. They are fully aware that cynically, you do not put up council tax in an election year, but will do so with impunity in other years. I think you should note and think very carefully about Barnet Council, for example, a Labour administration now who've managed not to raise council tax by the full 2.99% that we have to bear, but by 1.8%. Similarly, Westminster Council, another new Labour council, have frozen their council tax for 22-23. Both of these councils were previously Conservative, and both their Conservative administrations had left the council books in good order, as we did for you in 2014. This allowed you great latitude in your first term, but now we are entering your third, the cracks are multiplying, and as is Labour's way, council tax is going up. Of course, what you don't want to hear about is our Conservative neighbours in RBKC. But I'm sorry, I'm going to tell you. No increase in council tax at all. And in fact, an additional payback to bands A to D of £100. Conservative councils get it right for residents in difficult economic times. They must have worked very hard to achieve this, so why couldn't you? I congratulated you at the Policy and Oversight Board for continuing to support our most vulnerable residents with the Council Tax Support Scheme. This involves spending £1 million in 2023-24. However, this was our policy, however it was funded historically, and so you continuing to fund it should hardly count as one of your rather rare achievements. You have also benefited from not having to spend £1.3 million on national insurance contributions. So as this provision was in the MTFS, you could have used this as a subsidy to reduce council tax, thereby helping residents. But you chose not to. So residents have not benefited from this new government policy. You are also benefiting this year from increased interest rates, an extra £5 million of income. Honestly, you are so lucky. What about us residents? Is it coincidental that now you have found a new pot of £1 million to spend at your own discretion on whatever pet projects are in vogue with your group this year? No details, despite me asking, were proffered. I would like to mention here and ask for your support in condemning Mayor Khan and his colleagues for raising the GLA precept astronomically yet again. This is going up by 9.7% for 23-24. So since his mayoralty started, he has raised his precept by 57.3%. This is truly shocking. Last year, he gave you no support in the council elections and raised his precept by 8.88%, which looked bad on our council tax bills as you fought to retain your majority with a council tax freeze. Come on, admit it, you must have been just the teensiest, winsiest little bit cross. If you don't condemn him, are you condoning him? I doubt he'll remain long in his post now, and for Londoners quite exhausted by his increasingly wild decisions and charges, next year's elections cannot come soon enough. Councillor Afonso will speak more on this later. It's also rather pathetic to harp on about the government's decision not to increase business rates. Firstly, because the council has received compensation for this of 5.1 million linked to CPI inflation, plus the revenue support grant has increased by 2.2 million. And that means it's the government that has taken the hit. Secondly, the reason this was done was to support businesses through strong economic headwinds. Our local businesses and restaurants are suffering because of your administration. It's heartbreaking, for example, to see empty shop after empty shop on the Wandsworth Bridge Road. These shops and restaurants are bearing the brunt of your traffic displacement schemes. It's not debatable. These shops are affected and are not there anymore. Think what an impact has been made on the business rates relief that is liable to be repaid. And note this from the accounts, and I quote, "The sum receivable on business rates by LBHF may be £4.8 million lower." A further point which I'd like to make is your efficiencies and savings targets for 23-24 are a mere £2.9 million. Given what you have been given, this is pathetic. I just don't believe that you're trying to help residents. I will go into further detail on your fiscal choices that are making our borough a less pleasant place in which to live and work later in my speech. I'm now going to move on to development and affordable housing starts. Well, this truly is a shocker. The figures show that affordable housing is clearly not the administration's priority. Over the year to date, April to December 2022, LBHF has started to build. Now wait for it. What are you thinking? Started to build 50? No, surely more. Hopefully 100 units. No, I hate to disillusion you, and the administration backbenchers, but the answer is 6. Yes, 6. Only 6 affordable homes have been started. You have completed 101, but this is a third less than last year. So in percentage terms, you have contributed 0.08% of the total number of new affordable homes in London in the 6 months to date, and 1.88% of the total number of finished homes across London. What an appalling record. This cannot be helped by your extraordinary anti-business-like behaviour towards developers, treating some as unnecessary evils. No wonder they choose to build in other boroughs. Cancelling planning meetings, 1 or 2 last year, and both so far this year, is an extremely worrying factor. Why don't developers want to develop here? I think the answer is clear. You have an unrealistic expectation of Section 106 and SIL payments, and yet have accepted £46 million this year and are in the process of killing the golden goose. This bodes ill for our borough and is not what our electorate expected. I will now move briefly on to our actual housing department budgets, as Councillor Orford will speak on this in greater detail later. This department, itself so widely condemned after the Housing Ombudsman's damning report, is floundering. The damp and mould situation is chronic. The council is being chased by spurious claims lawyers employed by desperate and unwitting residents to gain compensation and posing a real threat to the HRA budget. The council has raised rents twice this year for an increase of up to £5.525 million. This has put a cat amongst the pigeons for tenants and leaseholders and their cost of living planning, and shows the administration has no heart. The number of voids is up, partly because so many properties are unlivable in. This is due to the continued dreadful repair services, so rent losses from that are up by 0.4 million. The paucity of repairs and the decision to make service charges variable taken by you in October last year caused the most upset and disturbance to residents, as our council inbox shows. I'd be surprised if the administration don't get the same heart-rending complaints. The housing general reserves will be down to 10.23 million from 15.6 million in April 22, with a prospect of only 6.7 million in 2024. This is a severe loss to the general fund. Rent arrears, of course, go up with random rent increases and are expected to rise to 7 million later this year. My final point on this subject may shock your backbenchers who are new to your actual way of running our council, and it is this. Housing officers actually have to pay for parking their own cars out of their own pocket when visiting residents in our borough who need their help. It's just unbelievable. Why economise on vital workers doing an extremely difficult job? Having mentioned Section 106 and SIL payments from developers brave enough to spend money building in our borough, I want to go through how absolutely necessary this is. This question mark from officers is highlighted in paragraph 32 of our papers, and I quote, where the level of uncertainty around trigger points increases. This means the funds are in doubt. Necessary monies that should be used for their original intention, which was to mitigate the stress of new buildings on existing infrastructure, are in doubt. You may well be using these monies to prop up your expected regular expenditure. A total of £17,484,381.15 has been spent as shown in the December 22 Cabinet report. This includes parks at 124,000, for example, and then surprise, surprise, community safety initiatives at almost 2,303,000. Wow, that's a lot of money. And do we all feel safer? I think not, given the knife and machete crimes listed by my deputy at full council in January this year. This is actually money spent on your new law enforcement team. These people, although there are only 6 women out of the 72 in the team, a statistic which is in itself worrying and wrong and needs remedying, is your solution to crime. You are hoodwinking residents. Having been out and about with my ward complement, I understood how genuine they are in their role. However, their powers are limited to the odd fine, and if a crime actually occurs, they call the police, just like we all would. They are paid the starting salary of a PC at circa £32,000, and yet you've chosen not to sponsor real police as we would. Residents also find the military-style uniform unfriendly, and the name you have chosen, law enforcement team, rather aggressive. You had choices as to names and style of uniform, but of course it's easier to give a tough name than real powers. The vast majority of our residents are naturally law-abiding and do not need to be bullied by council officers. I think you should think again. A further point under the Community Wellbeing and Social Inclusion Project sum of £494,431.25 is no money has been found to pay for delivery of food from food banks to residents. There's been a slip up there. To conclude this section, your attitude to developers, as I've mentioned previously, means that this 17.5 million is not a figure you can rely on to prop up your statutory spending. And given the collapse in planning application meetings, I'm very concerned that next year the situations for residents will look very bleak. Now, as residents will be aware, this year you are adding the full optional social care precept to residents' council tax bills. What residents may not fully appreciate is that this has been an option for at least 8 years, and you have chosen not to levy it in 6 of those 8 years. So only twice recently, and neither year, of course, was an election year. This 2% is a significant increase on council tax bills when the cost of living has risen. The government, meanwhile, has fully covered the department's COVID-related expenses. In addition, your much heralded free adult social care provisions for the very poorest is a policy with which we agree and would continue as I've said many times before. Given the income qualifying levels, this is also not a significant cost to the council, and so is not really an achievement, as you continually boast, compared to your other chosen spending. Councillor Lloyd Harris will delve deeper into the adult social care budget later. I'll now move on to environment policy and finances. This department used to have its own clear structure with a single pack, but since May 2022 has been divided into a myriad of different packs with increasingly long titles. Is this to hide the woeful provision of services which a good council is supposed to provide for its residents? Certainly, without Section 106 and SIL drawdown, the environment would be in an even worse state than it is currently. There is a net budget of 67,523,000, including the council fees and charges of 28,908,000. This enormous sum of fees and charges gathered from residents and businesses is being increased by a staggering 10% in 22-23, yes, 10%. A 10% increase on all charges except for fees and services for which the council has no authority. Now, the problem for residents is that sports and leisure services, for example, are being priced out of reach by these increases. For example, to play a football game on the all-weather pitch in Hurlingham Park is charged currently at £103.40 an hour and will presumably go up by £10.34 an hour to £113.74 an hour. You may have noticed that I kept repeating an hour because even I know that a football match lasts an hour and a half. Fees for marrying and dying for borough residents have gone up even more by 16% for marrying on a Friday in Fulham Library and up 27% for scattering ashes. For goodness sake, where is the compassionate council in all of this? Another of your priorities trashed. These are not stealth taxes, as you accused us of in 2014, but blatant and unfair ones. Residents will begin to notice that the council has signed a new contract for waste and street cleansing with Veolia. This contract is for 9 years and 9 months and has cost the council so far an extra £1.7 million. The provision of food waste collection is now statutory in any new waste contracts. So this has been priced in and the council cannot claim that it's their initiative to roll out food waste collection across the borough because you have to. The only choice you have is whether to avoid the large wheelie bin fiasco, as highlighted in the 5 experimental areas over the last 18 months, and I would urge you strongly to do so. I only hope I'm not too late to make that point. Our refuse and street cleansing staff have been tupied over, which is good for residents. I only hope that Veolia has better equipment for tackling weeds in the pavements, as last week the weeds were still being hit with a hoe and scraped out of cracks and crevices with a spade. Our residential streets look a mess with the weeds fly tipping on corners and graffiti on BT equipment. Keeping the borough as per the broken windows theory clean should be one of your top investments rather than subject to real-term cutbacks. It lifts the spirits of residents and discourages antisocial behaviour. Briefly, I'd like to mention our parks and open spaces. If you were at or listened to Cabinet on the 6th of February, you will understand this. I am an actual dog owner of a Westie and not merely a godfather to a dog in Brooklyn. I'm therefore out and about every day and walk in a variety of our parks. I would commend the park staff, but they do not have adequate resources to raise standards. This is very disappointing to those workers with whom I speak regularly. The administration does not support the environment enough. You only have to cross the border to RBKC and see how outstanding their parks, pavements and roads are, and how LBHF looks drab and unkempt in comparison. I will now move on to the parking charges debacle. I need to make this very clear, as the administration at Cabinet in January this year seemed to have a problem in understanding my point, and that was because you didn't like it. This council hiked parking charges, which had been the same since our administration in 2014, during the pandemic when no one was moving far from home. So it used to be £2.20 per hour or £2.80 in our town centres. Suddenly, it was £5 to £6 an hour. When I argued against this at Budget Council last year, your Labour group took note of your front bench mistake, and under pressure and during the short campaign, you made a political statement on behalf of the Labour group. The parking charge increase was a mistake, and you apologised. A win for us then. So let's leap forward to now, when you are reducing the charges to residents wishing to shop or visit restaurants in another parking zone. This wasn't the straightforward reduction back to original prices for which we had argued, of course, but an extraordinary table of different charges and discounts, dependent on engine size, pollutant output, or colour of vehicle, particularly red. The latter is a joke, being an integral part of the charge. Never mind residents' income or ability to buy new cars at vast expense, you showed you could not be brave enough to just do what you'd said previously in election times. This doesn't support our local shops and restaurants enough. There was also a wild, desperate and political promise to allow us all to park for free in all zones outside rush hour and at school collection times. Obviously, this has not materialised yet. It is, however, in your manifesto, so we're waiting and watching. Financially, because of your various schemes, you have benefited from a huge increase in charges relating to residents' cars. The income for the controlled parking account is an eye-watering, and I mean that, eye-watering £49.5 million. Ring-fenced, but that means more money for elsewhere. How convenient that the net improvement in inspected parking income is £2 million. This just about balances out the corporate revenue monitoring report overspend of 2.1 million. I will now talk about your propaganda name changes for your disruptive policies about driving about the borough and our bridge. Firstly, local politics should be about doing things with residents, as your values statement asserts. However, you do the opposite, line-siding residents and causing anxiety and furore. Firstly, the Sadiq Khan LTN in Harwood Terrace, then reversed, followed by the TCPR traffic reduction scheme in South East Fulham, then the CAN Clean Air Neighbourhoods in South West Fulham. All changes not properly consulted on property to property, as alterations to parking zones are, and this is a much bigger change. A change that relies on residents having and being able to use modern technology. This is just not inclusive to the older and some poorer sections of our borough. It's interesting that politically you're getting nervous as your manifesto moves these schemes to your Labour heartlands. Suddenly, instead of blanket camera zones, you are only doing this if residents actually want it and ask specifically for it. And guess what? Only 2 resident groups have come forward. And you're also in trouble with the King Street cycle lane, more accidents, appalling backup congestion, and so pollution all the way to the gyratory. TfL has also pulled the finance of 20 million for the rest of the scheme. So outside our extremely expensively renovated town hall, delayed and costing more per minute, when we eventually move in, we can admire the gridlock. As to Hammersmith Bridge, well, where to begin? The sporting event which highlights our borough on national television and beyond is the boat race. And yet again, on Sunday, the 26th of March, the bridge will stand empty of residents. It's an embarrassment to us all. 3 years and the stabilisation will not be finished until May or June. The future financial provision you've made makes me very nervous. Huge costs are involved, as you've boasted. You have gone your own way with solutions, as you've said many times, but will the government agree to your business case? It is, after all, them who are putting in 2/3 of the money, 1/3 going through their funding of TfL. You're responsible for the final third of costs. Let's hope that you actually do have a feasible plan in place in order to open the bridge again to vehicles, as you've promised, in its full resplendent glory, which includes cars, as I see none of that realistically in the financial accounts or forward plans. To conclude, this budget is very interesting for many reasons. The first being that you are so proud of it. And why is that? And the second is that you now feel obliged to follow the Conservative government on council tax and blame them while misinterpreting them at the same time, even when other London Labour councils haven't, and our Conservative neighbours in RBKC haven't either. Thirdly, that this is the blueprint budget for your third and last term in administration. No fewer than 3 of your most senior cabinet members are actively trying to be selected for Parliament, not all as successfully as each other so far. But nonetheless, I believe residents should be aware that the top members of this administration are no longer committed to our borough. This is within a year of standing for our council and winning. It's just shameful and an insult to residents who have voted for you. I've illustrated in my response speech that you do not have residents' best interests at heart. You put up taxes and fail to live up to your own value statements. Failing to follow your own value statements is just deplorable, and we will do so much better. This will, I believe, give residents hope for a radically different result at our next council elections in May 2026. Tonight, therefore, we will be voting against your budget. Labour really does let us down.
Thank you, councillor. I have received a list of speakers and will take them on an alternate basis. One from the administration, followed by one from the opposition. Councillor Rowan Reid, do you wish to speak now? Pardon me? Okay, fine. So, Councillor Borokwan, do you wish to speak?
Thank you, Deputy Madam Mayor. Okay, so I've chosen to speak on our administration's budget for the next year, and I'll be speaking to councillors who, like me, I think, when they were first newly elected, were possibly very daunted at being part of the group that has responsibility for the purse strings of Hammersmith and Fulham. Now, I'm not totally enumerate. I have been the financial controller for a small business before, but I have to admit that I'm more comfortable with words than I am with numbers. And not taking people's money for granted, particularly in a cost of living crisis, I think is something that weighs very heavily on everyone. This year, it feels more important than ever, particularly because the state of everyone's finances has been exacerbated by the turmoil which has come from the economic mismanagement of this Conservative government over the last 12, almost 13 years. As we know, households are squeezed in all directions: energy bills, mortgages, and food bills. And that's even if you can get the fresh food that you need in the supermarkets at the moment. So what I have learned is that although budgets, of course, are about sound financial judgment, they're also mainly about priorities and decisions. The thing is, everything has to be underpinned by making sure that those numbers add up, and it needs a scrutiny that we all across this chamber need to pay attention to when these budgets are being drawn up. But what I found is that the priorities and decisions are what really actually set the direction. And I want to again give my thanks to Sukhvinder Kulsi and his team for making possible the decisions and priorities that we as an administration have set forward. I think we all know that government funding to local authorities has been shrinking, ever downward spiral. And what we don't have are spare resources. We've got squeezes on everything. And all that we seem to have less sometimes is our decisions. There's no slack in the system anywhere at the moment. So we have decisions on things like social care, welfare, education, community safety, the environment, and everything that goes on in our local communities. So the decisions in our forthcoming budget, I think, are what have given me hope in spite of all of those cuts, which have been exacerbated by the Conservative government's handling of the cost of living crisis. It was reported this week that more than 60,000 adults with disabilities and long-term illnesses in England are being chased for debts by councils last year due to non-payment for their social care support at home. And lest you think that this is just sort of being chased on paper, hundreds of people have actually had legal action taken against them by these councils. So not only are they having to deal with very difficult circumstances at home, they also have the threat of legal action over them. So a decision that we made back in 2014, after we won the 2014 election locally, was a decision to provide that free home care for all of our residents who need it. And it's an ongoing commitment, and it's one that we pioneered in England. One of our residents, who's actually one of my ward residents, sits on as a co-opted member on our Health and Social Care Policy and Accountability Committee. And she pointed out a few years ago that home care charges end up actually being a tax on disabled, elderly and infirm residents. And to my shame, I'd not actually considered it in that light until she raised it in that way. Social care charges have risen by thousands of pounds for some residents. So making home care and keeping home care free is a priority and a decision that our administration has maintained. And the other thing I wanted to point out was that another policy decision that we pioneered was to provide in 2019 free school meals for free school breakfast for all of the primary schools in our borough. Something that the Mayor of London has also announced that is being extended across the capital. I mean, there was a comment earlier that, you know, Mayor Khan hasn't been in Hammersmith and Fulham supporting us. I mean, I think if you look at the results in Wandsworth, Westminster and Barnet, it's possible that he was needed and more successful elsewhere. And if you look at the election results in 2014, 2018 and 2022, I think we did quite well managing our own election campaign. So I think his effort probably went well in the other areas of London. So whilst a budget is about numbers, which have to be,
time up.
thank you, which have to be scrutinised, our budget is also one of hope and compassion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Adronny Alford, do you wish to speak?
Madam Mayor, I cannot support this budget as I have great concerns regarding the Housing General Fund and the Housing Revenue Account. Last year, it was stated at the Budget Council that there was needed to 3.4 million of unidentified savings to prevent overspend in the HRA account. And it must be remembered that the HRA must always balance. It was further stated that the proposed rent and service charge increase would be sufficient to ensure there were funds, this being just before the council election. Clearly, this was wrong. Indeed, it was stated that if government guidelines had been followed, it would have gone up by 4.1% last April. It didn't, but that was not necessary. However, what did you do in the middle of the year? You put it up. How could you miscalculate it so badly? Despite requests during the year for updates on the HRA and its supposed savings, both verbally and at PAC meetings, nothing was forthcoming. It was then announced in November that the rents and service charges will be going up for a second time in the year to match the shortfall in the HRA account. In some cases, the service charges went up by £20 per week, and this in particular in sheltered accommodation. So residents with fixed incomes were penalised. So we have a council who talks about doing things with residents and then increases their charges. This is doing things to residents, not with them. There was no scrutiny of this decision at any PAC or indeed even a mention. It's clearly considered that the PAC served no purpose and could be ignored. It was stated that service charges now an adequate reflection of actual costs. But I would remind the administration that they've been in power for nearly 9 years. If it was not accurate during that period, why not? Surely some checks should have been made to ensure the right amounts were being charged. In fact, the figure, which was quoted as 3.8 overspend on the HRA, was wrong. It's now gone up to 4.1. How can I have any faith that you've not miscalculated again? How can you expect the opposition to accept your accounting? This year, the account's been presented in a different format, but it shows the rents have gone up by 5.5 million and server charges by 3.3. And then there's this nebulous figure of 2.7 of other income, but no explanation as to what it relates. At least last year's budget statements, it was possible to explore what was been included. In this budget, there is talk of 1.1 million pipeline savings, but again, no indication as to what this relates. In both budgets, it was stated there were savings to be had, but never quantified. Indeed, I'm still waiting for a written response to exactly what last savings were arrived at and what constituted them. I suspect I'll be waiting next year. There was an assurance at this year's budget pack that the rents would not go up again, but that was said last year. So I regret I cannot believe this. The continued raiding of the HRA reserves each year means there's very little left to cover any emergency or unexpected costs. The HRA reserves have gone from 15.6 in April 22 to a proposed 6.7 in 24. So a total of 8.9 million will have disappeared in 2 years. If I was the administration, I'd be very, very worried. Bearing in mind the appalling state of the repairs in the council stocks, how much more is going to be needed to do any remedial work, let alone deal with the voids backlog? I'm only going to deal briefly with the general fund, as again, I have little faith in the figures. So many rely on assumptions, and I feel that there is insufficient clear data to accept these assumptions. For some reason, asset management and compliance have gone down, which, bearing in mind the poor state of housing, is cause for concern. Unless, of course, it's under another heading. The spend forecast has gone up considerably, as has the borrowing. I do hope this has been correctly assessed. In summation, I cannot support this budget, as I feel there is a lot of information lacking, and the continued increasing taxation of our residents is to be deplored.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Rebecca Harvey, do you wish to speak?
Madam Deputy Mayor, I support this budget, and it's important to continue the delivery of key council priorities and the provision of services for the future. As we heard earlier, in regards to the budget, it helps us to invest in our community safety and deliver over 5.5 million in CCTV improvements and grow our 24/7 network and our 72-strong Let's team. The budget is really important for ensuring that we can keep our residents safe in the community. And so far, our community safety teams have done a huge amount of work. So I will give you some examples. Trading standards have confiscated over £60,000 in illegal products around vapes and e-cigarettes. So, for example, one vape that was confiscated actually had the equivalent to 48 cigarettes worth of nicotine. So our teams are out there doing things to protect young people and residents. Our GANS unit and our our violence against women and girls teams are helping to protect vulnerable women and young people. And our Let's team patrol the streets, they find knives, they identify drugs, and they are a reassuring presence to our residents. And it's interesting, it's really interesting to hear the opposition say that we are hoodwinking residents. What a load of rubbish. We are not hoodwinking residents. Our residents feel reassured and they feel safe by the presence of our Let teams, and their uniform acts as a very good deterrent. You know, in Hammersmith and Fulham, crime has been reducing, and we've seen a reduction in public order offences. We've seen a reduction in burglary and violence against the person, and possession of weapons had actually reduced. So you're wrong about what you're saying. And what I'd like to bring you to is a lovely quote in My London, because they recently went on a walk with the Let's team, and this is what they had to say about our Let's team. This team of unlikely heroes, and they act as the eyes and ears for the council. The intelligence they provide in the form of pictures and witness accounts work miracles for the local Met police teams. Work miracles. Their impact on that area has been undeniable. And, you know, when I constantly hear at PAC and in council, this sort of obsession with how much the Let's team get paid, and this constant complaining that we don't, you know, sponsor enough police. Well, let me tell you what our local inspector had to say, Craig Knight had to say about the Let's team, because, you know, maybe it might reassure you and you can stop banging on about it. So, so what he had to say was, it's a good thing that we have the Let's, as people are fearful of approaching the police. And he said, you know, the Let's get good community intelligence. They gather the evidence and they operate alongside the police. They do joint patrols. The Let are critical. Please make sure you hear that. I know you're talking, but the Let are critical, a critical part. And they're an important asset to the borough and to the police. And if you don't believe me, go and listen to it. You know, so you're wrong. The Let's team do fabulous work. We are not hoodwinking residents. The budget helps to ensure we deliver for residents. And, you know, when you talk about pet projects, let me just tell you how wrong you are again, because we have teams in community safety that do fabulous, outstanding, amazing work. And our modern slavery teams have been going around protecting really vulnerable people. They've identified 30 addresses in the borough where there are real cause for concern. That's not a pet project. That is essential, you know, services to help protect residents. And finally, I will just pick up on these two key points, which got nothing to do with crime, but I can't help myself, I have to comment. Rent arrears all over the country is going up. And we know why, because of your Tory government's absolute disastrous management of the economy, and also welfare reform, universal credit. Everywhere it is, there's huge rent arrears have gone up. And just to say, as for planning, we have a very healthy pipeline of applications. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Amanda Lloyd-Harris, do you wish to speak now?
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Madam Deputy Mayor, I'm speaking against the Labor budget and inviting all councillors to reject it because it fails to provide an adequate and sustainable income stream to protect our most vulnerable residents. First, however, I would like us all to applaud the work that the Director, Lisa Redfern, and her team have done in standing up for the vulnerable in the community. I'm also well aware of the difficulties that have taken place behind the scenes. Going forward, the council is going to have to further address how to fund the quality services that our residents deserve. Second, we need to face the facts. We have a population that is living longer, with more residents requiring specialised treatments and support to ensure or improve their quality of life. Discharging patients back into the community, which has received additional government funding, will assist in freeing up much needed beds in our hospitals. The council needs to make sure that it is ready to carry out the assessments and make the necessary alterations so residents can return to their own homes. We need to pick up our end of the responsibility. That is why the government has provided the option of an adult social care levy, council tax that is earmarked for the vulnerable. Labor has yet again proposed more IT to cover efficiency savings, and I don't see how this is a major way to make ruthless efficiency savings at all. Is the Labor group going to copy the worst that can occur in the private sector rather than the best? Will staff be timed for their loo breaks? Will they be asked to drop letters from their emails to type faster? Will we start cutting corners on good governance? I can't see how this is going to miraculously generate extra savings. Did Croydon, Liverpool and Slough think they could hide the red figures in their plans by savings and more IT? We need to be responsible about this. Turning away from efficiency savings, I now want to focus minds on a more serious and disturbing note. No one likes paying taxes, but the Conservative government has at least provided a way to guarantee that people's hard-earned money is spent on the vulnerable, and not on Labor politicians' pet projects. We could actually really apply the adult social care precept all along. Sadly, the Labor group has chosen to put its own electoral fortunes ahead of providing steady, secure income to pay for services to the elderly and most vulnerable. In both February 2018 and February 2022, the Labor group voted through council tax freezes and chose not to take advantage of the precept. Was it just a coincidence that these were local election years? I think not. In both 2016 and 2017, the Labor group chose not to apply the levy and voted not to guarantee income for those most in need. At least the administration is not shy about what it does. We've been told, and I quote, the council was determined not to apply the levy. It would be nice if the council held up its hand and apologised for undermining its own service provision to vulnerable residents. Since the government introduced precepts for adult social care in 2016-17, this should have generated at least 9% of additional funds. Due to various Labor administrations, our residents have not received the benefits in services that taking up these precepts would have provided. They have lost out. It's only because of political ideology. All residents, vulnerable or not, are not naive, nor usually interested in party politics. But I do believe that if the Labor group was serious about generating funds for adult social care, it would have accepted the precepts, or indeed start thinking about other options. What would a Conservative administration do? We would look at sharing services with other boroughs. This would provide better support to senior managers, help retain good staff, and give us resilience to ensure high quality, affordable services. We would look at other councils, regardless of party politics, because we are humble enough to know that we don't have all the answers. What matters is the quality of life that we can give our elderly and vulnerable. I urge the Labor group members to serve the residents, not their political party. We are here to use our best efforts for the people of the borough. Council, please vote against this budget and force this administration to wake up and learn it is here to serve, not to be served. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Jose Afonso, do you wish to speak?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Another non-election year, another maximum council tax rise. And yet, this is not a surprise. This is what we have come to expect from a Labour council that makes residents pay for the cost of their privilege. Hammersmith Bridge has been closed since 2019. Instead of taking decisive action, the council is waiting for the government to bail them out. It makes one wonder, what are these tax rises actually funding? The Labour-run council has consistently failed to address damp and mould issues in the borough, leaving residents to live in horrific conditions, earning Hammersmith and Fulham the title of being the worst social landlord in the entire country. And now, residents will have to foot the bill for their incompetence. Meanwhile, the council has spent £40,000 of taxpayers' money leasing a Tesla X, one of the highest bills of any council in England. All this while residents struggle with their bills and they face a disastrous collective 14% tax rise from their Labour council and Sadiq Khan. Madam Deputy Mayor, it's the same old story under Hammersmith and Fulham Labour, a post-election premium to mark the start of a 4-year term of tax and spend. Yet there is another way. Just down the road, Conservative-run Chelsea and Kensington has frozen council tax to help their residents deal with rising bills and is offering an £100 rebate for those in properties banded A to D. A Conservative council in action, protecting its residents from the pressures of rising bills by taking action to protect those most susceptible to financial pressures without needing an election to spring them into doing the right thing. Madam Deputy Mayor, I am sure the administration will no doubt parrot what has been put in their report, that the council tax charge for Hammersmith and Fulham is the 3rd lowest in the country and 35% below the London average charge. But why is that? It's because when this party was in administration, it cut council tax relentlessly, because we on this side know that the people of Hammersmith and Fulham know how to spend their money better than the council does. Madam Deputy Mayor, the tax rises do not stop there. This year, the Hammersmith and Fulham post-election premium has come just as the failing Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, has decided to raise the precept by 9.7%. And what do we in Hammersmith and Fulham get for this? The right to be late to work, as Mayor Khan has recently celebrated the 100th TfL strike on his watch. There was also an attempt to cut off bus services, which was successfully resisted by this side of the chamber, working with Greg Hand's MP. Let us not forget that Khan's cuts to bus services would disproportionately impact those who are reliant on using this mode of transport. Many bus journeys in Hammersmith and Fulham are made by disabled people, families with young children, or older people who find using the tube system difficult due to the lack of step-free access at many stations. We've also gotten the right to feel less safe, as crime has skyrocketed on his watch. Antisocial behaviour is up, drug offences are up, violence and sexual offences are up. The overall crime rate in Hammersmith and Fulham for the last statistical year was 19% higher than the London average. We've also earned the right to pay for Mayor Khan's PR budget. I, for one, hope that the beach parties hosted by City Hall, that include the 400,000 spent on one in 2018 and 300,000 spent on 2019 party, as reported by My London, won't be making a return this year. Madam Deputy Mayor, under a Labour council and a Labour mayor, they have no one else to blame for their over 14% tax rise. While the leader of the opposition nationally has undertaken 11 rebrands, it is clear that Labour, be it nationally, regionally, or locally, is still very much the party of tax and spend.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Reid, do you wish to speak? Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'd like to start by thanking Sukhvinder Khalsi and Andre Mark and all of the members of the Finance Department and the officers and cabinet members who've helped to put this budget together. The hard work has been worth it, and this is a budget that we can be proud of, despite it being put together in the most difficult of circumstances. We are in a period of stagnant economic growth, something the leader of the opposition seems to have missed. Now, she claims that poor growth is a global issue and that we have the fastest growth in the G7. Well, it's easy to grow from a very low base. A better statistic is that there are only 2 G20 economies that have not yet reached their pre-pandemic levels. Now, one of those is Russia, a country currently being sanctioned by half the world. The other is Tory-run Britain. Now, she also seems to suggest that this year we've had a particularly good financial settlement from government. She quotes the figure 9.5%, but I'm not quite sure she understands it. The settlement calculates that our spending power will increase by 9.5%, but this assumes that council tax will increase by 2.99%. It assumes the social care precept will increase by 2%, and it includes £5 million of compensation for the government's decision not to increase business rates in line with inflation. That leaves us with an increase in spending power of just 2.5%. Now, at a time when we're facing double-digit inflation, that just doesn't cut it. It's an even more misguided view when you consider that since 2010, this Conservative government has cut funding to Hammersmith and Fulham Council by 56%, more than half. Now, they mentioned council tax, and I almost feel sorry for them on this subject, you know, because they're running out of Tory authorities in London to be able to compare us to. Perhaps they could try Tory-run Wiltshire Council, who this afternoon have increased their council tax by 2.99%, and they've increased their social care precept by 2%. A decision taken by the Cabinet Member for Finance, one Mr. Nick Bottrell. Remember him? But they do mention Kensington and Chelsea next door. A Band D council taxpayer in Kensington and Chelsea already pays more than £100 more than someone of the equivalent of Hammersmith and Fulham. And that's assuming the person in Hammersmith and Fulham is paying the full amount. There is nowhere better in this country to be a council taxpayer than right here in Hammersmith and Fulham. Not only do we have the third lowest council tax in the country, not only have we cut or frozen council tax 5 times in the last 8 years, but our progressive council tax support scheme means that 47% of residents, almost half, do not pay the full amount. Now, I've said that so many times in the last few months. If I'd had £1 for each time I've said it, I might almost be able to afford to pay council tax in Kensington and Chelsea. When the opposition were in power, they boasted about how they would cut council tax, even though they were paid to do it by Eric Pickles. As the leader says, since we beat them in 2014, this Labour administration has cut council tax by 15% in real terms. Now, it's quite something to hear the leader of the opposition trying to score political points on developer contributions. I really never thought that I'd see that. There is no over-reliance on developer contributions. These are managed prudently, and long-term spending is incorporated into our base budgets. The leader, Councillor Jones, and officers have taken a robust line with property developers, and that has not only improved developments, but it has resulted in significant funding for local causes. When this administration talks about developer contributions, we mean hard-won funding for the local community. When the opposition were in power, a developer contribution meant a free lunch. Now, Deputy Mayor, despite the difficult conditions that we're facing, in no small part down to the Conservative government, this is a budget that protects the vital services that so many residents rely on. It's a budget that maintains our status as one of the best council tax authorities in the country. It's a budget that supports residents through the cost of living crisis. And it is a budget that I recommend that we all support. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I now call on the leader to sum up, please.
Well, I'm sort of reminded of the problem Newsnight had a few years ago, really, having listened to some of the opposition speeches, where they would invite Nigel Lawson to offer his insights on climate change, and very quickly realised he had no knowledge or hadn't studied the subject. And really, as much as he may have enjoyed being on Newsnight and talking, it was nonsense. The first speaker, though, I would like to thank for being the only person I think I've heard anywhere on TV or read about in the newspaper who thinks the economy is going swimmingly well, and the last few Conservative governments has done a very good job. I'm not even sure people on those benches all think that. We had one speaker, the first speaker, talk about complaining about us taking the adult care precept, and another one, the same benches, complaining we hadn't taken it previously. You know, it's hardly a united thing. Parking. They put parking up 55%. Some of those people voted for it. I think the first speaker voted for it. And just to make it very clear, real terms means a real cut. Parking now under us is a real terms lower than it was when we came into office in 2014. Yeah. You know, I did meet a property developer once who had been talking to another big property developer and was complaining that the guy had bragged that, you know, this guy was saying, I've got Hammersmith and Fulham administration eating out the palm of my hand. And I worked out it was sort of about 2012. I was like, no, it's not me, it was them. It's only when I looked at the hospitality register, I realized it meant literally eating out of the palm of their hand, you know, as Rowan says. I don't think we should ever let them forget that they would have bankrupted the council with their non-index linked West Kent and Gibbs Green property deal. It was a wicked scheme in every single level, but we should never let them forget. And to just brush it aside, some of those people went and sat in Sally's house and told her there's nothing to worry about. We went through the books. It was awful what they did to those people and what they would have done to every other council estate resident too. And the let teams, Parks Police, you know, keep saying you're against them because the residents aren't. The residents really aren't, and neither of the police. But Hammersmith Bridge, I honestly don't know how anyone mentions Hammersmith Bridge on that side of the chamber. The person who first mentioned it, the first speaker, was responsible for, guess what? Any ideas? Hammersmith Bridge until 14. If it wasn't for Wesley, who found it was about to collapse, some of those people would have been facing negligence charges. They really would. And what do we get? Do we get any? I'm sorry. I never knew it was in such a terrible state. I didn't realize it could have been a national catastrophe. One of the world's oldest suspension bridges, Britain's most expensive bridge. You had political gameplay, which I can tell you, I was in all the negotiations with the government. Greg Hands, who said we shouldn't get any money, he did what he classically does, supported by this backing choir, of just trying to make it into an issue of anger and hope to harvest the votes. Well, he didn't. We had the biggest swing to Labour of any administration in Britain at the last election because they see through an opposition that tries to fool all of the people all of the time. And that's what we should never forget. You know, they say they care about the people of this borough. Well, you didn't like everybody, did you? Try to knock up their houses. You cut services for people who were poor. You really did not care. And we will never let you forget it. Now, if you really cared, this opposition really cared, they would have produced a manifesto. Yeah, they've not produced a manifesto since 2010. I remember their explanation for not doing one in 2014. They said, well, people know what they were going to get. Well, I suppose they were right there. They voted Labour in on a landslide. They didn't produce it last time. Where is their alternative budget? Where is their alternative recommendations? They simply aren't bothered, as you see from their speeches, to even get on top of the detail. They don't get on top of the detail. They don't care enough to produce an alternative. And that's why they're going to be in opposition for a long time. So let's stand tall when we vote this budget through today. Let's think about the people this budget will help. Let's go forward with a determination to recognise that our boss, the residents, we must never let them down. And I'm not going to say we're not going to make mistakes. I'm sure we will. But we will pick ourselves up, we will fix what we get wrong, and we will keep changing people's lives for the better, because that's what Labour does. And that's what's going to happen to our country in 2 years' time, when the residents of Chelsea and Fulham boot Greg Hands out and we see real change. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. I now move to the vote. As this is a vote on the budget, it is required that a roll call vote be taken. And as we don't have a division bell, Mr. Degg, can you please commence the roll call? Thank you.
Thank you. Will councillors please indicate how they wish to vote on the recommendation? Councillor Alexander. Councillor Antonides. Councillor Brown.
Not voting.
Councillor Campbell Simon. Councillor Shavop Verdier. Councillor Coleman. Councillor Collins. Councillor Cowan. 4. Councillor Daly. Councillor Harcourt. 4. Councillor Harvey. 4. Councillor Holder. Councillor Homan. 4. Councillor James. Councillor Jones. Councillor Kwan. Councillor Lang. Councillor Melton. Councillor Murray. Councillor Morton. Not present. Councillor Nawabi. Councillor Perez. Councillor Quayam. Councillor Reeve. Councillor Sanderson. Councillor Schmidt. Councillor Sadiq. Councillor Susslers. Councillor Taylor. Councillor Trey. Councillor Ume Francis.
4.
Councillor Ume Mercy. Councillor Vaughan. Councillor Walsh. Councillor Afonso. Councillor Orford. Councillor Burland. Councillor Brockbank Fowler.
Against.
Councillor Dinsmore. Against. Councillor Carmel. Councillor Lloyd Harris. Councillor Pascu Toubert. Councillor Stanton.
Results 32 for, 9 against. Recommendations are carried. Item 6.2, 4-year capital programme 2023 to 27 and capital strategy 2023 to 2024. I call upon the Cabinet Member for Finance and Reform, Councillor Rowan Ree, to move the report and recommendations.
Formally moved.
I have received a list of speakers. I call upon Councillor Andrew Jones to speak. Thank you.
Many thanks, Madam Deputy Mayor. Well, after the evening so far, I feel it's quite important to come back against some of the unreality that we always seem to have in recent years from the opposition in these budget meetings. So the first thing to say, and I don't quite know how the opposition are going to vote, but we have a capital programme here, which has got £500 million of investment in the next 4 years. And as we said earlier, the turnover of the authority is only 123 million. So just to get to the very simple economics of it, that's quite a lot of money. That's a lot of investment in things for the residents of this borough. And some of my colleagues will talk about a lot of things. What I want to focus on is something that's already been raised, which is our commitment from 2014 to deliver genuinely affordable housing in significant numbers. And as we have previously heard, it's been raised about the level of affording housing delivery. And there appears to be a lot of confusion, but I do appreciate that if you dig into the appendix of a report and look at a number you don't understand, or perhaps find a website that hasn't got accurate data, you can generate a narrative around many things, like, for example, that the UK economy is the fastest growing economy in the G7, which that comes from the Chancellor of the Exchequer. And I do appreciate if the government, you need to put it in a positive light. I think, as the leader said, the world of all political colours regarded that with a mixture of incredulity, ridicule and pity, I think. Because, of course, if you take an economy that was massively impacted more than anywhere else in the G7 in the very tiny window that you're talking about, and compare it to a year later when it was growing again, it did indeed have the fastest growth in the G7. Unfortunately, by every other measure, it's the worst performing economy in the G7. So this is a bit like the affordable housing delivery. So there was a number pulled out. I don't know where it's from. It bears no relationship to reality, because obviously, as you might expect, some of our excellent officers in the economy department know how many affordable houses and indeed how many houses we've approved in planning and how we're delivering them. And I can just, I mean, broadly speaking, roughly since 2014, we've approved 19,000 new houses. And we have delivered thus far 1,752 genuinely affordable homes. And I'll come to the nature of the homes, of which we've got approved or in process, and a total that will be 3,920. Now, we have in this capital programme, to reiterate, and this is the reality of the situation because this is a public document, £448 million of investment in genuinely affordable housing, right? Not all of that has been built yet. 100 of it is based on £150 million of borrowing, which due to our excellent officers, we're not paying the current interest rates, but have secured better finance, as I've discussed at Cabinet. Of the homes to yet be built, outlined in the capital programme, 765 are genuinely affordable across 17 sites across the borough, which I would recommend people go and have a look at. And these are real things that are really happening. Francis and I know this quite well because we have a very big development going on in our ward where we're building genuinely affordable houses, and there are all the impacts of that development and the disruption that we're having to obviously work with residents to mitigate. That's the Ed City development where 100% of the houses are genuinely affordable. And I want to follow that through with a bit of a tour of the borough just to reassure people in the room of what is being built. So in Ed City, as outlined in the programme, we're building over 100 genuinely affordable homes. And I want to contrast this to the point made about 2014, because whatever the number is, 3,920 or 1,752, it's much better in genuine affordable home terms than the number that the previous Conservative administration would have built on these sites. Because that number is 0, because there was no genuinely affordable homes. The only affordable housing built in any of these sites in the last administration was discount market sale housing, which is basically a minimal discount to people who were quite wealthy who could afford to buy those homes. There was nothing else, nothing equivalent to new council homes. The vast majority of everything we're building is like new council housing and is to rent for people, residents of this borough. Obviously, that's more expensive and we have hence the very large number. So we're doing that in the Civic Campus. If we move down to Hammersmith, we are doing it in Farm Lane, as is about to come to Cabinet, which is also, again, there'll be 32, I think, genuinely affordable homes. Had that continued in the previous administration, that would have been 0 in a net gain sense, because that was a site we regained as the West Ken and Gibbs Green estate was giving back to us. We still have the West Ken and Gibbs Green estate, and we have gained that site in terms of building genuinely affordable homes. I could add, that's what we're doing in the south of Fulham at Watermeadow Court. So I thoroughly endorse this capital programme. I do hope every councillor in the chamber will vote for it because it is excellent and probably nationally outstanding. Thank you very much.
Councillor Pascoe-Tilbury. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Mayor. One benefit of having studied English literature at university is that spending 3 years of your life surrounded by fiction prepares you rather well for evenings such as these. So, some of my favourite bits of fiction, that there was a government instruction to raise council tax, that it was only needed 1 rent and service charge increase this year. That, the Castle Club, which was alluded to previously, that was sold off. No, it was on the English Heritage Buildings at Risk Register because it was not invested in by the then Labour administration. That it has nothing to do with the government and everything to do with Hammersmith and Fulham, that NATO is coming to White City and that low tax is Labour through and through. And when we didn't have fiction and we didn't have a bit of history, we had spin. So let's take the capital expenditure on housing, lots of money, and we welcome money being spent on housing. But what it actually represents is long needed action to remediate basic issues, including, but nowhere near limited to, damp and mould, that have made the lives of council residents for the past few years a living nightmare. Obviously, we welcome investment in our area, but how did it ever was allowed to be so bad? As we heard in the budget, housing now requires millions of pounds for extra remediation. Would this expenditure have been needed had they fixed the issues on time? Everyone knows that if you leave damp and mould untreated, it just gets worse. And of course, we've heard about cuts, to which I'll say, look at the increase in government funding this year. Remember that there are councils in the country that have not had this issue on housing, and consider that basic aspects of management, such as, replying to emails from concerned residents or listening to their concerns in a respectful, meaningful way. That's not about money. It's about attitude. It's about focus. It's about grip. We are, however, delighted to know that work has also begun to develop a more strategic approach to the council's role as a corporate landlord. You do wonder what residents would prefer, a more strategic approach or simply homes fit to live in. The capital funding is also dependent on building additional homes, which is a key factor in the HRA's future viability. And we are absolutely pro building more units because we've seen firsthand the pressures where there's lots of demand and not enough supply. But you have been in power for a while, certainly long enough to have a decent pipeline of building, and we come back to it. The number of affordable homes started between April and December of last year is 6. That is less than the number of rebounds that Keir Starmer's had. I think we've had more planning committee meetings than that. Now, from 6 to a proper amount does seem to be a little bit of a courageous target, and I very much hope that you welcome it because we will all benefit. So what else is in the goodie bag? Now we have public CCTV equipment purchase and installation. Great. Will you ensure that the CCTV is actually watched? Because that's been the big problem to date. We've got 64 million for the acquisition of commercial units on King Street. Now, many of you will have noticed that our high streets aren't exactly doing brilliantly for a number of reasons. In the same breath, we were told there's going to be smarter working at the refurbished town hall, so more working from home. Now, it takes genuine skill to buy a depreciating asset with one hand and hobble it further with another. Is that really the smartest way to use 64 million pounds worth of taxpayers' money? We have the maintenance of world-class parks, open spaces and cemeteries. So let me tell you a little bit about the maintenance of parks. We have, for example, leaves that fall down from the trees every year, and because they don't get cleared up on time, that makes no grass or flowers grow underneath them. That means that later on you have to have replanting, double the work. Is that really good stewardship of money? It's pretty basic stuff. Now, Madam Deputy Mayor, I am not going to claim there is nothing of merit in this capital spending programme, because clearly we do welcome investment to the area. But there is a lack of inspiration, a lack of grip in a lot of what we've heard, and most frustratingly, often a lack of joined up thinking. It is, I'm afraid, the work of administration going through the motions because their eye is on another prize. So let me repeat something that our leader had said in her speech. If they don't want the job, we do. Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Reid, do you wish to speak now?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. They may very well want the job, but the residents certainly don't want to give it to them. Now, I'm going to talk about the rents in the housing revenue account because they've been raised a couple of times, and this is a slightly more appropriate place to raise it than the discussion on the revenue budget. Rents pay for some of the spending in our new affordable houses that we're building. I'm glad this year that the opposition have agreed a position amongst themselves on what they think should happen to council rents. Last year, the leader of the opposition said that by increasing them by 1.5%, that was too much, whereas Councillor Alford said that it wasn't enough. Now, again, the opposition may not have realised it, they may not have noticed, but we are in a cost of living crisis. We set rents to cover the costs that we have at a level that we need. We don't try and grasp as much money as we can possibly get hold of and then decide what we should do with it. And yes, they're right to note that towards the end of last year, we did increase rents. Now, what might have caused prices and interest rates to shoot up in September? Previous meetings? That's right, Liz Truss's mini budget. Now, I understand the opposition don't really want to talk about this, and I'm not surprised considering most of them actually voted for her and voted for her platform. But at the end of last year, that communist rag, the Financial Times, printed a story about the moron premium still hanging over UK public borrowing costs due to the loss of credibility from that budget. Through inflation, through higher borrowing costs, Liz Truss's budget cost this council £15 million, as we heard earlier. Let's let the opposition think on that next time they try and tell us that things that go on in Westminster don't affect us. This year, Again, we have set council rents at 4.4% under what we are able to do. Why? Because the cost of living crisis is still going on and the residents who have to pay them are affected by it. Now, Councillor Alford asks if we are going to put up rents again. How about this? I promise not to put rents up again if you promise not to re-elect Liz Truss. Now, this 4-year fantastic. This 4-year capital programme sets
Thank
out
you for
over
that
£500 million of investment to make Hammersmith and Fulham a better borough. Investment in building genuinely affordable homes in an area with some of the most expensive land prices in the country. Investment in world-class education facilities for the children who grow up here. Investment in our CCTV network, our environment, and a brand new civic campus that will be at the heart of our community. This is a plan to invest in our borough's future, and I hope that everybody here will support it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Paul Alexander, do you wish to speak? Sorry, this is Councillor Alexander's maiden speech, so I hope you all respect his silence.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Can everybody hear me? Before I start, I have to thank all my colleague councillors here who have been so supportive. My wife, age 41, died, Susanna Moya Bayon, who can't be here tonight, and the friendship, comradeship, and genuine support from people in this room are really why I'm here. And so if I may move on, it's an honour to find myself elected and here tonight at the behest of Sands End residents. May I take this opportunity to thank Sharon Lee, Coyote, and the team of officers who worked tirelessly through the night past 5 AM to deliver the 2022 election of 50 members. With an unprecedented majority of girls, 5 Conservative and Unionists, and 22 Labour councillors, with a packed programme to brighten our residents' horizons in these dark times confronting our nation. The challenge for me is not only recognising this nascent emphasis on equality and equal opportunity, but also that I reflect what I'm going to say, rather than penny here, penny there, and that stuff. What are the outcomes? What are the outcomes for our residents? Yesterday, I met one of Fulham's newest residents, Sunny Ray Moriarty. Sunny wasn't due to be born until mid-March, but had to be delivered by an emergency caesarean, 7 weeks premature and weighing just 1,600 grams. We owe our gratitude to the hard-pressed NHS staff who work so hard at Chelsea and Westminster, as well as Charing Cross and Hammersmith hospitals. Sunny is so fortunate to leave hospital for a warm, dry, peaceful and secure home in Fulham. May I express our community's heartfelt thanks to Jerry Crowley and Simone Mellier and their teams, as well as Housing Cabinet members Lisa Homan and, of course, Francis Zume. Unlike my generation, Sunny will not have to ingest and breathe strontium-90 or tetraethyl lead, with concentrations that on Fulham's Talgarth Road were the highest in Europe. Now, with thanks to John Galsworthy, Cabinet members Sharon Holder, Ben Coleman, of course, Fulham's pathfinding new clean air zones are reducing the DEEs, which are diesel engine exhaust emissions. So Sunny's generation will have lower risks of bronchoconstrictive ailments, disorders, lung cancers, and coronary diseases. We must proceed with a programme that reduces nitrous oxides nitrogen dioxide in our atmosphere. And I invite you all to join me in wishing Sonny and his generation a bright and healthy future with this first-class housing, education and health secured by this outstanding capital spending programme. Sorry, there's more. Well, having been persuaded by the 22 ladies here and the 5 ladies there to be a bit more realistic about outcomes rather than things, I will move straight off the numbers and come to a conclusion. And I don't want the Deputy Mayor. So in recommending this programme, I would like to extend my thanks to Sukhvinder and his team for preparing this budget, and obviously Councillor Rowan Ree, because it's eye-wateringly difficult, I think, for any council to put that sort of a programme together. And I am learning and staggered by the scale of what's actually done. And I will sum up by just to say, finally, may I conclude with the report that Sonny's weight is now 2,500 grams, and his right foot is now bigger than my thumbnail. And we'll be wetting his head on his intended day of birth, which happens to be the 17th of March, which, as you know, is St. Patrick's Day. Now, until Sonny and his generation are old enough to celebrate the budget with a glass of black beer, Sonny and the born in 23s will be following this capital programme with great interest, particularly with any matters relating to formula milk. Thank you.
Thank you and well done. I think we all want to meet Sonny now. May I call upon Councillor Florian Chevap-Verdier to speak? Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Haven't they been delightful tonight? I wanted to speak to you about what you've heard from both benches, which is that tomorrow we commemorate 1 year of the invasion of independent democratic states in Europe at a scale never seen since 1939. We've seen the worst of unrestricted warfare. We've seen the worst of the massacre and bombing of civilians and mass exodus. It reminds us it's a dangerous world out there, even on the doorstep of NATO and the EU, and why we're better off in both of them. But we've also witnessed the best in people. We've seen the heroism of the people of Ukraine, who reminded us that democracy should never be taken for granted, and that its defense sometimes means paying the ultimate price. We have also seen people in our borough work tirelessly to ensure the safe passage of refugees, volunteer spare bedrooms and sofa beds, and give essential items, and provide shell-shocked adults and terrorized children with much needed warmth and support. I know many people here have experience of war. My family name's on my hometown cenotaph, and my grandparents taught me stories of the war when they were resistance. So I want to give my thanks to the leader, to the cabinet, to council officers and all the residents who continue to help those Councillor Cohen 1 year ago on the very day of the invasion, called our brothers and sisters. To the residents, I say, just like Nicholas Winton and many more unsung heroes of the past, you make us all proud. By remaining mobilized in support of the people of Ukraine, you honor and reaffirm our values and our core identity as a universalist and egalitarian borough. My fellow ward councillors will agree this is a fitting item to talk for a West Kensington councillor. In spite of all the Tory-inflicted socio-economic pain we're going through, this programme ushers in a new era for West Kensington and Gibbs Green estates, which are identified as one of 10 spending priorities across H&F. Now, I know we've heard it tonight, they hate it when we hold them to account for being the source of our long-term issues in public. But to fully understand why this is an important night for us and my team, I want to take colleagues down memory lane. In 2008, the then Tory Health Council sold off the estates to a developer, and so began a relentless 11 years campaign spearheaded by the Labour Group, then the Labour administration, and ward councillors, of which Councillor Brown, and of course the local residents association, then expertly chaired by Sally Taylor, our now rockstar Councillor Taylor, and Diana Belshaw. But their destructive fury didn't stop there, because in 2014 they raised the Earls Court Convention Centre in an act which is nothing else than cultural and architectural vandalism. Imagine having your life held up for 11 years, living in fear that a developer might expel you, raise your house, with no certainty you may ever be able to afford to live in the area again, just to create a sandbox playground for Russian oligarchs. The subsequent investment into the estates we're discussing tonight will make tangible differences in our residents' lives. More housing, new windows, new doors, cycle parking, retrofitting, installation, new communal spaces, and much more will improve their daily lives, their health, their well-being, their finances, their economic potential, all of which have been stifled extensively from almost 13 years of Tory misgovernance. So we don't know, the opposition might vote for this item tonight, and they'll certainly continue to shamelessly campaign the very people they fought to take away their right to live in West Kensington. But no amount of cute, I had written down Scottish Terrier, turns out it's a Westie. No amount of cute Westie on pictures will ever change the welcome I know residents will give them on the estates. So I've thanked a lot of people tonight, so I hope I didn't sound too much like I was accepting Miss Universe, but it is really important. Without all of these people I've mentioned, there simply wouldn't be a West Kensington to invest in tonight. Tonight is the culmination of a 15 years fight for dignity, equality, and the right of people to live in our borough. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Now, Councillor Francis Umi would like to speak.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. 13 years of a Conservative government have wreaked havoc on Britain. This nation has been crippled by austerity measures. Cuts to vital services such as education, health, and social welfare, and limited housing investment has created greater inequality and social division. With the cost of living increasing, the quality of life for many has declined, and the impact has been felt more acutely on the most vulnerable. The opposition's already been served with a few history lessons this evening, but as the leader says, we will say it again, so you will never forget, and so now it's my chance to say this too. When the opposition were in charge in this borough, there was a severe lack of maintenance and investment in council homes. Schemes were either cut or non-existent, as the then administration, instead of regenerating and building new affordable housing, opted to offer homes for sale and demolition. In addition, a 10-year repairs contract with insufficient funding only made matters worse. Shocking and shameful practice has left thousands waiting for a home and thousands living in homes that saw pennies instead of millions of pounds invested to improve them. The housing service, like all council services, has been subject to many challenges, all while operating against a backdrop of financial cuts, soaring inflation, economic uncertainty, COVID, Brexit, all further compounding the issues. Despite this, this council, this administration, together, are making a significant investment in homes. We're improving them, greening them, and building them, all while making sure they're safe. And this evening, you already heard that over the next 12 years, there'll be more than £500 million worth of investment in modernising 12,000 homes to ensure that residents have a decent and safe place to live. Homes with modern facilities and services that are well maintained with effective insulation and heating. We also have dedicated teams addressing the challenges facing the housing stock, challenges that other boroughs and councils face. We're also making homes more energy efficient. With Hammersmith and Fulham housing accounting for 75% of the council's carbon emissions, the programme to retrofit homes must rise to one of our greatest collective challenges, the climate and ecological emergency. More than £100 million of funding will help us in this journey and our overall ambitions towards 2030 carbon net zero emissions. And finally, we're building more homes. As you've heard this evening from my colleague, Andrew Jones, we're committed to building more than 3,000 energy efficient, affordable local homes for local people over the next 4 years. Andrew's already spoken about some of the developments in Ed City and across the borough. And one point I really wanted to emphasize is the point of co-production and designing these schemes within the community with members of the Disabled Residents Housing Group. This is vital to ensuring that they are accessible and inclusive. And inclusion as well as equity are important. All, no matter what their background or race, must have access to decent, affordable housing. Families, key workers, first-time buyers, pensioners, professionals, regardless of their circumstances. But this just isn't about homes. We're building communities and a foundation for people to live fulfilling lives. So I recommend we all support this programme of vital investment and modernisation to build homes as well as communities for this generation and many more to come. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. So the question is the report and its recommendations agreed? I beg your pardon. Certainly. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Deputy Madam Mayor. I'd just like to briefly touch on Councillor Ree's pathological obsession with Liz Truss. First, I'd like to say that I think it is grossly inappropriate to speculate about how any member of society has voted in any election. You've done that a few times now, and I think you should think carefully before doing so again. And what was the problem with the mini budget and with Liz Truss? Well, unfunded tax commitments. And what was the Labour Party's answer to that? When Rachel Reeves was asked, what would you do with the 45% tax rate? She said, we'd put it back up and we'd spend that money on police. That doesn't solve unfunded tax pledges. That just perpetuates the problem. But this party acted swiftly when there was a problem, and they replaced Liz Truss within days. And as a result, now inflation's due to hit 2% in November. We had a budget surplus in January. Now, what that means, you can start paying down debt. Then you stop paying interest on debt, and then you can spend it on public services. At the moment, we spend more on debt interest payments than we do in defence. This party has also been investing in the police, with on track to hit 20,000, and NHS waiting lists are going down. Now, let's just briefly contrast when the Labour Party's had a difficulty with the leadership, and probably the grand master of unfunded tax pledges, Jeremy Corbyn, a terrorist sympathiser, a man who overlooked systemic anti-Semitism within the Labour Party, a Russian sympathiser in the recent war. He wasn't thrown out by the Labour Party. He won 2 leadership elections and he lost 2 general elections. And it was only then that he was removed. So if you're going to continue playing politics about Liz Truss leadership debate last summer, I would look on your own party's history in removing leaders and think carefully. And just a final point to come back to the leader's point in relation to my speech about local issues and national causes. I don't know if you didn't understand the point or you deliberately misrepresent it. I entirely understand that national issues can affect local communities. My point is that we should be focusing on what the solutions to that is, rather than simply complaining about the fact that a problem exists. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, councillor. Are there any other speakers? Oh, yes, councillor Schmidt. Thank you, councillor. I now move to the vote. Those in favour? And those against? The recommendations are carried. Item 6.3, Treasury Management Strategy Statement 2023 to 24. I call upon the Cabinet Member of Finance and Reform, Councillor Rowan Ree, to move the report and recommendations.
Formally moved.
I have received a list of speakers. I call upon Councillor Rowan Ree to speak.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Now, I think everyone's heard quite enough from me this evening, so I'm going to keep these remarks very brief. And I promise I'm not going to mention a certain former Prime Minister either. Now, I did just want to praise the hard work of Phil Triggs and the Treasury team. Despite market turmoil, double-digit inflation, and soaring interest rates, this council's balances remain in a strong position. Now, this is due to the administration's sound financial management and the skills of our officer team. The council remains in a strong under-borrowed position and has healthy cash reserves, and this strategy sets out how we will continue this approach to navigate whatever choppy waters future Conservative Prime Ministers decide to send our way. Thank you.
Thank you. I now call upon Adrian Pascu-Tilbury.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Mayor, and thank you also to the cabinet member who did not allow himself to be trussed up by difficult. It's a pleasure to speak on this topic, and I echo the thanks to Phil Triggs and the Treasury team. The Treasury management might seem like a dry topic to many, but it matters because without effective management of the council cash flow, borrowing and investments, everything falls down. We saw an example of this back in the 1980s when Hammersmith and Fulham entered into swap transactions with a total aggregate notional principal of 6.05 billion, simply to be able to collect and spend the premiums for entering into the trades, an act worthy of Trotter's independent trading. It would, of course, be churlish of me to mention the name of the party in power. Some in this room wouldn't have been born then. But it is a salutary lesson of the need for eternal vigilance, backed up by a series of regulations and guidance set nationally to ensure councils don't stray too far. And the prudential framework, which sets out what councils can and cannot do, isn't a political document, it's a technocratic one, and the council is well advised by an independent economic advisor. It's reasonable to say this has been a difficult economic time, due in no small part to global events that have been little short of cataclysmic. The UK has certainly not been immune from this, but I hope that the party opposite will join me in celebrating good news that UK public borrowing is 30 billion lower than had been anticipated. We appreciate that market conditions have also been difficult. There's an irony in this. Turbulence has actually been quite good for the council investments, especially through money market funds, with a £5 million windfall in cash balances. I'm also sure when it comes to investments, that the party opposite will welcome the good news of the FTSE 100 reaching an all-time high just earlier this month, proof that confidence is returning in the economy. Turning to the Treasury management statement itself, we broadly welcome the focus on a small c conservative management policy, particularly in how funding is sought. There are nevertheless areas we urge careful attention to be paid. It's noteworthy that from 2023-24 onwards, gross capital financing charges, which is loan interest, MRP and finance and PFI payments from the general fund capital programme will start to increase. Although income is also forecast to increase, we need to watch this really carefully. And I hope you agree with me, this is the sort of area where quite big black holes can emerge quite quickly. So it's really vital to keep an eye on things. Capital spending plans, especially on housing units, can also slip, and that will have a material impact on the figures reported. So we urge vigilance in this area and for the right mechanisms to be in place so that we can see any problems emerging quickly. We'd urge further clarity on when we think the housing revenue account may need to actively consider new external borrowing. Given the turmoils around housing, this needs to be looked at in the round. Finally, we note that other investment opportunities features in this paper, and that can be a great thing. It can be anything from loans to third parties to buying shareholdings. It's also where politics can rear its ugly head. We urge the administration to remember that wheeling dealing isn't what sound treasury management is about, and we urge them to behave soberly and responsibly, as I'm sure they will. As I said at the start, this is a relatively technical subject, but it really does matter. So we will continue to ensure that the administration sticks to the guidelines and doesn't take its eye off the ball. Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Daly, bearing in mind the time. Thank you.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Right. So recently, I found myself agreeing with Conservative politicians. Last month, the Conservative Mayor for the West Midlands was spot on when he said, Whitehall's bidding and begging bowl culture is broken, and the sooner we can decentralise and move to proper fiscal devolution, the better. The halving of funding to councils has been spoken to time and time again, but its replacement with the chaotic favour-based pleading system they call a levelling up fund is utterly nefarious. Perhaps the reason new local funding has been mostly directed into Conservative areas is because of a new VIP lane that we just aren't aware of. Maybe we should ask Greg Hans and Mark Higton for the inside scoop on that. So an LGA analysis found that council taxes will need to increase by 20% over the next 2 years to make up for the shortfall in funding. 20%. What this council does, the services it delivers, the priorities it makes and how is inextricably linked to central government policy. And as much as the opposition here may want to dismiss the damage that 13 years of Tory governments have delivered, we can't scrutinise Treasury and management strategy unless we understand the fiscal environment it was created in. We do need to talk about a lost economic decade, about unrelenting austerity, which expanded private debt and didn't solve public debt, of low investment and next to no economic growth. Now, the leader of the opposition has used her time this evening to talk down our borough, calling it drab and unattractive. She railed against let uniforms, the names of committees, the cost of keeping a car, being tough on developers and the boat race. She's woefully out of touch as she believes these are the priorities of the majority of residents. Our own NHS is broken. Energy and food prices are through the roof. Supermarket shelves are empty again, and the cost of debt is skyrocketing for all of us. Councillor Alford thought to bring up housing, but she makes no mention of the hole in our housing budget made by Conservative chancellors and their rent decrease of 1% every year for 4 years. It was a clumsy attempt to reduce the housing benefit bill, which only succeeded to significantly impact the viability of the HRA for every local authority in this country. That policy removed £17 million of income from this borough, income which may otherwise have been spent on improving the conditions of our homes. When the opposition last won control of this council, local funding was double what it is today in real terms. Real term wages were higher than they've ever been since, and funding policing was higher than it's ever been since. There was no universal credit pushing people into debt and poverty. Back then, this borough didn't even have a food bank. The simple truth is the councillors in the seats opposite don't have any idea of the challenges of leading a council in 2023. This is an extraordinary, unstable and uncertain environment. As Councillor Cowan framed it in his opening address, this is the most challenging economic environment this borough has ever known. This coming year, English councils will be operating with a massive funding gap of £3.7 billion. Near neighbours in Kent, Thurrock, Croydon and Hampshire are all facing bankruptcy. Just 1 in 5 Conservative-run county councils say they are confident they can avoid bankruptcy this year. Perhaps the opposition would like to tell them to just work within your means to reach a balanced budget and to stop whining. To quote the Conservative leader of Kent, we've never been looking at a projected set of pressures on this scale. No one should doubt the gravity of the situation.
I'm sorry, councillor Daly, for interrupting you, but the guillotine has fallen, so I must stop you there. Sorry. Yeah. So, I will ask members to vote on the following reports. Item 6.3, Treasury Management Strategy Statement 2023 to 24. Agreed? No? Don't have to take. So I'll take it to the vote.
Yeah.
Those in favour? Those against? Those not voting? Right, okay, so the recommendations are carried. Item 6.4, Pay Policy Statement 2023 to 24. Is report and its recommendations agreed? Take it to the vote.
Those in favour?
Those in favour? Those against? Those not voting? Recommendations are carried. 6.5, Members Allowance Scheme Annual Review 2023-24. Is the report and its recommendations agreed? Agreed. No?
No.
Oh, nearly went through. Those in favour? Those not voting? The recommendations are carried. Yes. Recommendations carried. Item 6.6, agreed. Okay, review of the Constitution, agreed. Great, thank you. That's the end of tonight's meeting. I'd like to thank everyone for attending and for watching. And if Emma is watching, I hope you get well soon. Thank you.